was the Union of Soviet Social Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers, and they have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government.
Good morning to most, good afternoon to others, and good evening to our viewing audience across the pond. My name is Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of Pop Life here on this Revolution Podcast. So glad to have you guys here with us today. If you are a returning listener, subscriber, fuck yeah! If you're new to the channel and you do enjoy what you hear or see here, please make sure you hit like and subscribe. On your way out is a passive gesture that goes a very long way in making sure we can continue to do what we do here on This is Revolution. Today we're going to be talking about something kind of interesting, I think. I might have bit off more than I could chew when I thought of this subject matter. So I did bring in some film aficionados. We will be joined with superstar rock musician / podcaster Conan Neutron and a very good friend, Professor Toure Reed, who's also a massive fan of a few of the films that we'll be talking about today. The exorcism genre holds a unique place in horror, often drawing on themes of innocence, spiritual warfare, and patriarchal power structures. While its narratives are typically formulaic, revolving around a possessed figure, often a young girl, and priests arriving to cast out the demon, the genre also reflects broader societal anxieties about body autonomy, religious authority, and family dynamics. Many exorcism films lean heavily on cultural tropes, with a few standing out for their engagement with more complex themes or departures from genre norms. Today we'll explore 5 significant exorcism films, from iconic classics to new interpretations, analyzing how each interacts with the genre's conventions and challenges them to varying degrees. Here's our list for today. And I will say, we're probably not going to cover all of everyone's favorite exorcism movies. If you do disagree with these 5, that's fine. Definitely leave it in the comments of the 5 you would have picked. But we're going to start off with, of course, The Exorcist. William Friedkin's Exorcist is the foundational work of exorcism horror, causing a stir for its visceral portrayal of demonic possession and controversial religious imagery. The infamous production faced numerous setbacks, often seen as reflecting the turmoil depicted on screen. This film's critical reception and lasting impact reveal how effectively it tapped into societal anxieties of the 1970s. Then maybe my favorite on this list, I think the entire panel's possible favorite on this list, The Exorcist 3, written and directed by The Exorcist author William Peter Blatty. Exorcist 3 continues the narrative with a fresh perspective, emphasizing psychological horror over shock value. Blatty's direction draws on philosophical themes, creating one of the genre's most introspective entries. Many consider it a more layered and in some ways superior work to Friedkin's original. Third, we'll be looking at The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Now, this film marks a genre revival that experiments with the based on a true story approach. This film combines courtroom drama with horror, exploring themes of faith, science, and institutional power. It questions societal definitions of sanity and the legitimacy of religious experiences in the secular world, creating a nuanced discussion on mental health and belief. Our fourth entry might be one of the best films of the last few years, in my opinion. Late Night with the Devil, the newest on our list. Late Night with the Devil departs from genre norms by framing possession within the setting of a fictional 1970s talk show. This film is a genre-bending take, blending exorcism horror with cultural satire on sensationalized media reminiscent of the era's late-night television programming. It plays with the exorcism format while commenting on the media as a modern exorcist, claiming to expose dark secrets. And lastly on the list, it's The Demon, or Il Demonio, an Italian film. As one of the earliest entries in exorcism horror, Il Demonio is an Italian film often overlooked. It visualizes the exorcism genre's gender dynamics with a narrative that intersects spousal abuse, mental illness, and patriarchal control. The film uses demonic possession as a metaphor for the internalized violence faced by women under societal and marital oppression, offering a critical lens on traditional power structures. These films offer a window into not only horror, but broader social and cultural anxieties. Each one engages with themes of power, authority, and the societal other, reminding us of the genre's unique capacity to critique and unsettle dominant narratives. All that being said, let's bring in the players. He is one of my best friends, touring musician. You may know him from his band, Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. You may know him from his extremely successful, very long-running podcast, Protonic Reversal. He is the Conan Neutron.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
How are you?
Yeah. I accent the extremely long running these days. Once you hit past 10 years in podcasts, that's like 72 and
it's like dog years.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, looking very sharp, clean shaven. You're like me. If you lose any of the facial hair, you drop like 10 years. Like, seriously, I'm not kidding. I'm the same way. I'm like,
this is all accidental. There's nothing purposeful about my look.
Were you doing like I can probably shave myself a Hitler mustache? Oh no, that's good.
No. Well, what happened? Speaking of Hitler, what happened was I was trying to take the beard down, and I got the maybe I could take the mustache down, and it ended up being a little Hitlerish.
I was joking. That's actually the answer.
It is just all. It was all.
Wow.
It was bad.
Wow.
It was bad, and it all started because someone looked at me and said, "I think your beard's uneven. I think it's higher on this side than it is on that side."
Once somebody says that is a bell that cannot be unrung. Like once somebody says that, because you're going to be looking in like windows, you're like, is it?
Yeah, and I'm walking
centimeters.
And the person said, "Well, if you just sit like this, you're fine." And then they started laughing, and I'm thinking I'm walking around looking like 9 kinds of an asshole with this weird layered face, and so I figured I was going to fix it myself, and by fixing it I shaved it all off and now look like a penis. So there's that. Speaking of clean shaven men,
you do not look like a penis, by the way, FYI. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be on here. We've been doing vampires, a movie night extravaganza all month, so it's kind of
this is a nice departure.
Yeah, it's a nice genre breakaway to actually talk about.
And I will say this before I bring in our guest. I'm thinking of something to do for Saturday, and I go, I don't have enough time to put a music thing together. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think I could put a movie thing together.
There you go.
And I don't know how exorcism movies came in my head. It was very random. I think
you a guest that can do both. That's the answer.
And I wasn't even thinking. I was like, I could do this by myself. I thought of Exorcist 3 because I think Teray and I were actually having a conversation about Exorcist 3. Maybe I'll blame him for this, right? I'll blame Teray for this. And the moment I put the show up and it's time to like get the script together for it, I thought to myself, I don't like this genre of films that much. And when I sent you the message, if you could come on, your first thing was, this is my least favorite genre.
It It's
Well,
slop.
you know,
It's largely slop, but there are
it's
some great movies in it,
yeah.
and
No,
that's one of the reasons
great.
why it's important to call out the really great ones. I think personally. So yeah.
I think
Anyway,
we got 5 good ones.
I don't think I've ever been on with Teray. So this will be
Okay.
interesting.
Well, he's a very intelligent man, and
I didn't say I didn't know who he was. I said I don't think I ever.
well, his knowledge of the exorcism genre is the impetus for this show. So please welcome my very good friend, scholar and author of an amazing book called Towards Freedom. His name is Teray Reed.
Hey. I love all the applause. Thank you so much. Conan, it's nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you.
Likewise. Yeah. It's like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I've definitely been on with him. I'm like, no, exactly. I don't think I have. But I've heard you plenty, and I think you're swell. So there you go.
Same. Plus, I've never used swell before to describe anyone. So
you should. I'm bringing it back personally, so you can assist me in that goal. So.
And I'll call you Wally, and you can call me the Beef.
Yeah, gee, Wally.
That'd be swell.
That'd be swell.
Teray's more of an Eddie Haskell character, by the way.
You know Eddie Haskell was like a cop for a while, like an actual the actor. Isn't that wild? Like, and also like totally predictable if you ask me.
Does Eddie Haskell be a?
Yeah, man. Big cop energy.
If I got pulled, I don't care where in SoCal I'm at. If I got pulled over by Eddie Haskell, I'd be like, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Okay, sir.
We were pulled last time. We were pulled over by the military, and that was my first time ever having the military do the cavity search. It's very unsettling when a Humvee with a 50 cal turret rifle on it stops you while you're walking to your car.
Yeah, man. Yeah, are you dicking around a Mad Max world? No. You gotta puff the tail at, my friend. You better get your life together.
I've never been. I usually get real pissed off around law enforcement, but this was the calmest I ever was. I turned into Bryant Gumbel real quick. Well, how are you today, Admiral? How?
You're turning into Eddie Haskell. Hi there, officer.
What would you like from my pockets?
You still had a little too much bass in your voice, Jason.
I was just listening to the best hits of Neil Sedaka.
There we go. That's Brian Gumbel.
Dude, Brian Gumbel is bumping Neil Sedaka. You know he is.
Oh.
Neil Sedaka, everybody. Thank you.
Top down in his Miata.
Wow, I think he could do better than a Miata.
He's got it tricked out. Don't worry. He's got the fucking luxury package Miata.
Yeah. He's got the go faster racing stripe. Yeah.
Yeah, that goes with the rest of his demeanor. Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to put an exhaust.
The Fast and Furious version of Brian Gumbel.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Remake the Fast and Furious movies, but instead of you know who, put in Bryant Gumbel.
Yeah, fuck Vin Diesel. We want Bryant. We want both Gumbel brothers.
Dude, I would religiously watch every film if Bryant Gumbel was the head of like an action franchise. Hell yeah!
Well, with Gumbel and Gumbel,
is that money?
Is that what Family Guy did? Gumbel and Gumbel.
Yes.
All right. People are like, I want to hear about demons and exorcism, and these motherfuckers are talking about Brian Gumbel.
Who is Brian?
I want to ask you guys both.
That's my influence, I guess. Sorry, my bad.
I think this genre works best. I was talking with Ben Burgess about this, and he said that because he's such an atheist. I was like, "Are you really such an atheist that The Exorcist didn't scare you?" He was like, "Didn't really do anything for me." I was like, "God, man, you guys must have no fun."
But it's also that he's Jewish. I mean,
whoa!
What? No, I have yet to meet.
There's only one. There's enough room in here for one anti-Semite, Teray, and that is me.
Okay, well, this is not.
I thought I was on with Professor Griff for a second. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure Dr. Umar would come on, but it didn't get much the same effect. But Jews have a very different take on the devil than Christians do, and that's part of it. I mean, I've yet to meet a Jewish person who's really been moved by The Exorcist or any of the sequels. And part of it, and most of the sequels suck, right? It's only Exorcist 3 that's actually good.
Oh, Exorcist 2 doesn't make any sense.
No. It's nobody knows why that was made.
The two versions of the beginning, fall flat, and then the most recent one had potential, but it didn't really do all that it could do. But you have to have a certain kind of vision of the devil for The Exorcist to work, right? So
that's. Do you agree with that, Conan? Did you grow up religious?
No. I grew up completely irreligious. I'm a stone cold. Well, I say secular humanist because I think like when you proclaim atheist, it means you're going to be kind of a dick about it. It's kind of,
I agree.
and I say that
wholeheartedly.
as a fan of like many popular atheists, where I'm like, man, you need to stop talking. Like it's enough.
They're like
But
vegans like that.
it's
That's
the
what
law.
you don't
have
hang
to
around either
discuss
one.
it.
A vegan atheist CrossFitter is the worst person
my
in the
God.
world.
Can you
You want to
imagine?
say
Can
that
you
you eat a whole food plant-based diet rather than vegan. And
Right.
You get the same results, right?
Yeah,
But for
yeah.
health,
You give the sentence long definition that doesn't include the term that means you're an asshole.
that.
So for me, I didn't grow. It's Christian myths, right? It's
Mhm.
like I grew up irreligious, so I studied some of that stuff in the same way that I studied like Zeus and Thor and like Jupiter and it meant the same thing to me because I had no personal stakes in it. I didn't grow up with it. So therefore the mid to bad entries for this kind of thing, which is supposed to play on, oh, well, in some deep part of your childhood brain, you have a reaction to this. I don't have any of that. So therefore, without that trapping, like bad movies within this genre really stick out as horrible for me.
Would you guys say though that because we are all children that come of a certain age, of a certain awareness in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, all of us are fans of a certain type of music that definitely used a lot of demonic themes?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We also come of age in a time where horror movies are being overproduced on this level that maybe I don't even think today can catch up with what we got out of the 80s in the video and straight to cable era. Does that make a difference in the way you view these films, the cultural moment of the 80s?
Because of overexposure, basically, as a kid. Because once the video store world came in, right, I was sitting there, I'm looking at these Hammer horror films, I'm looking at Mario Bava, I'm looking at like all this stuff, because it opened up a world of film to in a populist way to people that didn't have that ability before. Not everybody had like a cinema that would show older stuff, and the grindhouse stuff. It's just like, oh, it's real cheap to make these movies. You can ply your trade as a filmmaker, even if it's not your genre of choice. And frankly, there was a lot of really good ones. There was also a lot of really terrible ones because people got some attachment to the genre by looking at the outliers and the progenitors, the paragons of the genre, if you will, and then got used to the filmmaking trademarks of things that you would see in certain beats of the story. And then they started to accept and then venerate like these sequels and these knockoffs that frankly aren't very good. And it's weird to me because most people that are quote unquote into horror don't approach it from that perspective. But me and my friend, the dearly departed Clay, my best friend for many years, we had a thing where we would go to the video store, we would pick out the best horror movie that we could find, the one that looked the coolest and the best, and we would also pick out the worst one, like the one that just like that looks horrid. And his theory that I enabled was we would watch the horrible one first, and then it would make the good one seem even better. So I saw a lot of drivel, just trash from the trash can horror films over the years because of this motif. But I also saw some really amazing ones, and then that actually led me to kind of think more critically about not just that genre but film in general, which led me to be on a movie podcast today.
There you
Congratulations. Go. I just logged my 1,000th film on Letterboxd last night.
Wow.
And I've only been on since 2020, so take that, nerds.
Don't tell John Carpenter.
Well, Jason, to your point about the 80s, I mean, I think one element of the story, and this certainly relates to the Satanic Panic point, is that, the Catholic Church, and I'm sure this is true for Protestants as well, but it's certainly true of Christianity, I think broadly, kind of moves away from notions of evil as the product of human beings, right? Yeah. Like after World War II, maybe even with the Great Depression, evil is really in the realm of human contrivance. When you get to the era of neoliberalism, though, we move away from evil as a product of human beings, right? And a lack of empathy or compassion for each other. Because how could that be evil if neoliberalism insists that rich people get socialism and everyone else gets social Darwinism? And instead, what we have is the notion of evil as inhuman, right? Which works well. It's basically the theme that drives Exorcism films and the like.
Ooh, see,
That's a great
Conan,
point.
I told you that's why he's on here.
Well, and to tag that, just recently, I watched my 1000th movie was A Woman in the Dunes, which is a really cool artsy Japanese film that, like many films around that time, is talking about reconstruction of like the whole Japanese ethos, what it means to be Japanese, and and has like one of the best analogies for capitalism ever, because they're in these dunes and they're digging up these dirt for these villagers so they can sell for cement, but they're stuck and conscripted to do it, right?
Yeah.
And there it's like Sisyphus. It's never going to be enough. You're never going to be done. And the boulder's going to keep rolling down the hill. Dunes are still going to keep collapsing on you, and it's done so well and so artfully. But it's one of many movies around that time that really all of them are around that World War II era reconstruction of what it means to be Japanese, and like what kind of stories we tell to ourselves for like a country that ultimately was ruined by this war. And I find it fascinating being more into world cinema these days and exploring that aspect of seeing not just the American perspective, but everyone else as well, because it wasn't just us. But I think that is dead on. That it becomes like, look at David Lynch, right? The God of Light episode of like the Twin Peaks: The Return, which really is a big analogy to where like evil has to come from somewhere else. Something this bad cannot come from humans. There's no way. Or at least that's the story that we like to tell ourselves, because absolutely it can. But
excuse me. Well, that leads into the first question. How does The Exorcist reflect broader societal fears of body autonomy and patriarchal control? What do we make of the young girl's body as the site of struggle between male religious authority and demonic forces? The quote from the movie, "The power of Christ compels you," a phrase that embodies the absolute authority granted to religious figures within the narrative. Go ahead, Conan. You want to go first?
I mean, it's a patriarchy. Next question. Okay, so no, but like fully engaging with that, it does seem to be like it's women, and usually young women. That's why it was kind of
why it was kind of
right. Even in El Demonio, which she's at least a woman of age with some degree of autonomy. I mean, you're dealing with like Italy in this even less evolved times than they are now, and women have no rights. They're treated like chattel. Like it's the things that she undergoes. Like they literally build like a like people under the stairs, like the little lair for her to hang out in. I think there's like multiple, like she gets taken to an exorcist that rapes her. I mean, it's horrendous. Like it's horror. And I'm saying this because I know this is a movie that most people haven't seen, right? Like I'm the one that's always like, oh, why don't we do this obscure this film that nobody's ever heard of? But you have to know your history, and you have to know like where things come from, because when we look, Jason, I know when we looked at that, what are the top 20 Exorcist movies of all time, to see if we missed anything. 70 to 80% of that list is from like 2 years ago, and most of them are trash. It's like, really? Like, do you think this is one of the best of all time? Have you seen a movie older than 5 years old? Like, ridiculous. So in sorry, I don't like lists. El Demonio, like, you never looking at it from a modern perspective. I don't know how it landed then, because the filmmaker was of a Mario Bava and like all those Italian filmmakers. We wouldn't say they were noted feminists, right? Like there's always like, all right, there's this beautiful like raven-haired young lady just getting the business like the entire time of the movie, like whatever she's got going on. And I think we are in a situation where, because we do live worldwide in a patriarchal society, that it's young ladies are meant to be victims to be saved by the pious man. Because remember, religiosity doesn't hold the same place culturally that it used to. But even in this country, right? Look at the Pilgrims and stuff like that. Look at like witch burning and things along those lines. There was nothing considered more powerful than the church, and nothing considered to be more laudable than to be a man of the church in a high position that had the power against, again, this outside force of evil, which is the only explanation, because people cannot possibly have that come from themselves.
To have the power of Christ. I mean, in the Exorcist movie, the female characters in the movie, I guess we call them the female protagonists, which is Reagan and her mother, Ellen Burstyn.
Who's great. Ellen Burstyn is like so great.
I
general,
rewatched a few of these films for the show today, and I started watching the list because originally I was going to go down the 20 best exorcism films or whatever it was called. And
No. Don't do that to yourself.
I didn't have time. B, I didn't want to, and I thought, why don't we just pick 5 and have people tell us how stupid we are for the next month and a half? And I'm fine. I'd much rather have that than try to go down a list and watch all these movies. But the female characters are lost in this film without men.
Yes.
Do you see that same thing, Teray?
It's funny because I was 3 years old when The Exorcist came out. It hit me and I'm a lapsed Catholic, and yet at the time, my parents, being black hippies, were basically irreligious. But then they sent me to Catholic school a few years later and put the fear of God and, crucially, the devil in me. So I still view The Exorcist through a lens of a child, at least in part, right? The visceral effect that it had on me at 3, just the commercials. I didn't see it until I was like 17, but the commercial had a huge impact on me and horrified me. So I'm going to go back to the first gender point. It is worth noting, even though I would say that I'd viewed it more as a child and the helplessness of children, irrespective of the sex of the kid. Roe v. Wade was decided at the start of 1973, right? In January of 1973. The Exorcist came out December 26th, 1973. And thinking about some of the details of Reagan's experience, right, during possession, the way the forms of body mutilation that she engages in, let's say with the crucifix and the like, it is really quite striking, the impact that it has, or what it says about women and autonomy over their bodies. And of course, we can transition there to the priests coming to the rescue. Yeah, I mean, the rub is that one of the 2 priests is a competent exorcist, and the other one is struggling with his faith, right? I mean, it's going to have to be priests who come to the rescue because women could not be priests in the Catholic Church. And it's a Catholic film, and it's obviously, Blatty's Catholic, or was Catholic. The quote unquote true story that The Exorcist was based on, the possessed child was a boy. And so the fact that with the novel and of course the film adaptation, they went with the girl, speaks to the initial point. But no matter what, the people who came to the rescue by nature of who the men of God were, or the people of God were in the Catholic Church at that time and currently, more complicated for Episcopalians, were going to have to be men.
But does it? So I'll throw another movie, and it's not necessarily an exorcism movie, but it's a demonic movie. The Omen comes out, I believe, a little bit before this.
No, after.
Is it after this? It's 78.
It's more like 76 or something like that.
Okay.
The Omen.
Another film where the female character is kind of just lost, and
the mom.
Yeah. When do these female characters get some balls?
Well, is it fair to say that Ellen Burstyn is helpless? She's advocating for her daughter.
Yeah.
In the face of a medical establishment that is committed to stiff-arming her, right? And she never relents. She pushes and pushes and pushes until she gets the appropriate remedy.
I mean, you can say the same thing about Rosemary's Baby, right? It's kind of losing your sense of reality as the Mia Farrow's character is constantly being like grabbed by men by the arm and shut up, this is where you're gonna go.
Well, that one's unambiguously a window onto the patriarchal sensibilities at the time, right? The guy in Rosemary's Baby feels as much like her dad as her husband. It's really creepy.
Wasn't she dating Frank Sinatra too at the time?
She was married to Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Wow, there you go. It wasn't even acting anymore for her.
Directed by noted feminist Roman Polanski. Yeah, but I think that, but it's also the 1960s sensibility of challenging those norms at the time too. At the same time, and like bringing out it, like cartoonishly, like look how she has no autonomy over any part of her life. These are like literal doers of evil. Like
he calls Guy daddy at one point.
Yeah, I know that's right. I forgot about that.
She eats the moose or the mouse, as Minnie calls it. She says, "Yes, daddy."
Yeah, that's
oof.
Quite creepy.
So are these movies?
I think in the exorcism genre, it's very rare to see any kind of female empowerment of any kind, but it also, and if there is, it's just sort of like, oh, this is our take, it's a girl boss exorcist, okay.
But again, I mean,
so like, how did this film's controversies around the portrayal of religion, sex, sexual undertones, and graphic content contribute, in your opinion, to its massive success?
It was the time, right? I mean, that for the original Exorcist, again, I made a special point of including El Demonio because I wanted to point out that like this genre didn't existed before that very excellent movie, and we covered The Exorcist last year with the Matthew Film Guy, and it was really interesting to put into a historical perspective because a lot of things we think of as like horror movie tropes and whatnot, it's not just The Exorcist, but like a lot of movies around that time established those is we didn't realize they were tropes at the time, and it's if there's a lot of factors involved with it, but I think as far as I don't think Friedkin was trying to make like a political statement or anything. I just thought he was freaky, and and he was not wrong about that at all.
I agree.
Well, it's a real movie though, right? I mean, like Star
Absolutely.
Wars turned schlock into a real film, right? And The Exorcist turns horror films, which I think long been on the periphery of serious films,
Yes.
With a couple of noteworthy exceptions, like Rosemary's Baby. It treats horror as a serious film, right? I mean, the film is a story of revenge. I watched this recently independently of this podcast, coincidentally, but the first 40 or 45 minutes, I think it's 42 minutes, is all character development. You only see Reagan's eyes roll to the back of her head and her throat expand at around the 41 or 42 minute mark. And up to that point, it's the mother, the daughter, the complicated or really non-existent relationship with the father, which is one of the many reasons that I would stress that Burstyn is advocating for her daughter in the face of a healthcare industry that is committed to not doing right by them or not listening to this woman. And as the film unfolds, I mean, even just thinking about the cinematography, that Friedkin, I think, began his directing career as a documentarian. And there's a realness to how the scenes are shot that pull you in. And I'll even add, there's an intimacy to this, right? I mean, I think the reason that it scared me so much as a child, I tried watching it, at 10. And the moment that Linda Blair's eyes rolled to the back of the head and the throat swelled, I was out. But it messed me up in large part because it takes place in the kid's bedroom. It takes place, in the house.
That's your safe place.
Exactly. And there's a parent dynamic that was somewhat relatable as well, right, between Reagan and her mom. And so that realness to the film. Oh, and I'll add, by the standards of the day, the effects are excellent by the standards of the day. And I think most of them hold up very well.
Yes.
It's kind of, it sucks you in. And I think part of the effect, or a major source of the effect of the film in 1973 and why it had such long legs is that it is a real movie. And people had attention spans back then, and they got sucked into the human dimensions of the film in a way. Let's say, I'll jump subgenres but keep it horror. Alien Romulus, by contrast, has about 13 minutes of character development before the action begins, right? So there's not a realness to it. That's a film that's really let me look this up on Wikipedia kind of film. Let me go to my smartphone. And it's a film designed for distraction. Exorcist is about showing you life and an inhuman horror in life.
Well, I don't know why Romulus has to take flack, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but I take the point. Also,
so you love the hybrid. You like the hybrid engineer alien human.
Look, my man, that's not what we're talking about. That's all I'll say. But I think that look, I think you're right with it, with the reality of Friedkin, and look at what he did with the movie after this, Sorcerer, remake of Wages of Fear, which should have been called literally anything else. Because if you do a movie about demonic possession and you call your next movie Sorcerer, people are going to expect supernatural stuff, not people hauling around nitroglycerin in the goddamn jungle. And it's a great film that unfortunately also went up against a little movie called Star Wars. So. Remembered well by history, but not a hit at the time. But I think that there is something to be said for The Exorcist specifically being like, oh, this feels like something that could happen down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, even though people forget, like when it starts off, you're like, where are we? What's happening? It's an
Yeah,
archaeological
in
thing.
Iraq.
What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like people forget all about that because when they think about it, it's like this is like your neighbor's daughter or
Right.
something, you know, and like that, there's a certain aspect, and in the 70s were great for that style of film where not just it could happen to you, it's like it could happen like here. Halloween, one of the greatest to ever do it, right? For me, one of the most terrifying things about that movie is when Laurie Strode is like trying to like go to the neighbors for help, like knocking on the doors, and like you see them like turn the lights off, and it's like, oh my god, crazy. Because think about that, like the soft complicity of being part of like the overall terror that's happening. You know, it was a great time for that because we just hadn't seen that on a screen, at least as Western audiences.
Well, and you can add, I mean, the title of the film tells you that this is really a revenge film. It's not really Reagan and her mother are pawns, and that this is ultimately about the demon wanting to exact revenge on Father Marin, hence his appearance in Iraq at the beginning of the film for the exorcism that apparently centered on James Earl Jones. But anyway, according to Exorcist 2, but the exorcism that he had executed expelling Pazuzu, is that the demon's name? In Africa. And then, of course, the demon picks up Father Karras along the way, right? But I think that the revenge element of that story, the demons, the inhuman evils, quest for revenge, is really quite powerful. It's easy to overlook because of the human genre, the human dimensions of the dynamic between Reagan and her mother, which are essential to the horror of the film. And of course, just to look ahead, not that we want to jump there, that revenge narrative is carried out in The Exorcist 3.
Absolutely, which is a way better movie than anybody realizes, unless you're
very much underappreciated
because of the 3. I think the 3 definitely affects it because if you did watch 2, and I don't know too many people that actually watched and remembered Exorcist 2.
I've seen it, but I couldn't tell you a thing that happened in it.
Yeah, it's just not a really good movie. It's one of those, like, most of it is the first one anyway. A lot of flashback scenes. Just.
Well, Blatty, so I don't know if you guys have all seen The Ninth Configuration, which is the other movie that Blatty did. Also fantastic. It's almost like a better version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, if you ask me.
Oh, wow, no,
and I say that as a huge fan of Cuckoo's Nest and that book and movie. But yeah, Exorcist 3, it's amazing that like that. Look at Stephen King versus William Peter Blatty as far as like an author doing like a movie, right? Like no shade to Maximum Overdrive, but not even in the same cast, because it is genuinely freaky. There's like at least 2 scenes in that movie that was like,
you know,
though
the director's cut is not like Blatty's unadulterated vision definitely falls short. But the studio was actually correct.
They were actually right in this one exactly.
Well, let's get into Exorcist 3.
Which is originally called Legion, right? Like it wasn't even originally going to be like an exorcism.
And
there was no exorcism.
I wish Halloween 3 was called Season of the Witch.
Period.
And it was
an
an anthology
series,
right?
Yeah.
And never had that Halloween tag on it, and people wouldn't whine, moan, and complain and cancel John Carpenter. I said it. Because then you get say again?
Because of that movie specifically, or just in general?
Yeah. Read reviews of that movie at the time. I hate the revisionist take of it now, where it's like, oh, I always liked it. No, you didn't.
I was gonna say, all I've heard from people in the last 4 years of how, it's the best Halloween. All right, fine. Like everyone's entitled to opinion, but that's idiotic because, like, come on, like they're different movies and they should be treated differently. I agree. And I think you're right, but I think again he wanted to be an anthology. Right.
He did. He wanted to get away from what it was. I think he did want it to be called Season of the Witch, and the studio was like,
"Studio's like, no,
winning IP. Why would we lose out on this winning IP?" Also, if you guys don't believe me or want to see for yourself, John Carpenter now has a Letterboxd account, and I believe his first review was, "What the fuck is this Letterboxd bullshit?" And he
whether it's real or I want it to be real, whether it's real or not. Like
he writes about his own movies.
Yeah,
great. And it's hilarious the way he writes about Halloween too.
Yeah,
it's
good stuff. But we're talking about Legion, aka
Exorcist 3. Exorcist 3, which I watched randomly on a first date and spent the whole time screaming
with a Catholic, right?
Yes.
Woman. Dude, that's up there with me going to see the Cronenberg Crash on a date, which is a thing that I did do. Turned out fine, by the way. But I was
that
definitely
poor
like,
woman was can you slow down, Conan? Can you please slow down?
ooh.
Slow down.
Didn't realize how horny for crashes they were going to be.
Yeah, that's look. What can I say?
Did you not know what it was about?
I just knew it was a Cronenberg movie, and I wanted to see it. I wasn't
You
really.
go see this new Cronenberg movie?
Yeah,
I'm sure it's totally not going to be about people banging in car accidents.
Yeah, exactly. They get off on it. Luckily, it worked out okay. But
Okay.
that's almost as bad
Orgasmo.
as that.
Orgasmo's an interesting first date.
Yeah.
too.
Have you done
As I
that?
know
Was that
from-
is that
I
a
did
thing?
that.
Do you know? Oh wow!
I know that from personal experience.
Did you take
Well,
someone to see Orgasmo on a first
I already
date?
owned it, so they were back at my house. So we watched
Wow.
Orgasmo.
Out of all the movies you had the whole
Yeah, let's try
DVD
this
shelf
one.
up. You're like,
Now
well,
you're
I
a
have
man.
So was there a moment that you're like, oh, I've made a terrible mistake, or did
Nah,
you?
'cause
Where
I'm
you're
me.
like, nah, this is like a litmus test. This is like if you
It
can.
was a litmus test. I had
Okay,
two
I like
litmus
it. I
test
respect that.
movies,
Yeah.
and that was on the list.
And this is how it went, Conan. We can watch Orgasmo, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds great." And you heard,
Well, I wanted to gauge your reaction to the opening song. Do you remember the opening song of Orgasmo?
"No."
It's inspired by Frank Stallone. What makes a man? Is it the woman in his arms just because she's got big titties? Or is it the way that she fights every day? No, it's probably the titties. Now you're a man. So if they found that funny, you were good. We didn't have to watch the rest of the movie, but I needed to gauge whether or not they thought that intro
No, I
was
get that. All
hysterical.
right. No, but respect for knowing what you're walking into, and again, using it as like a litmus test. I'm
Wheat
totally
from the
down with
chaff.
that.
Wheat from the chaff, says
Yeah.
Martin Luther Blissett, great again.
Yeah, 100%.
Or make Martin Luther. I'll lie. I'll read the thing because I keep saying the wrong words.
You say,
Blatty's
Martin Luther
writing.
great again.
Make
Okay, so Legion was a movie directed by William P. Blatty, author of The Exorcist.
With no
Blatty's
diet
writing
form.
drives into deeper philosophical questions about the nature of evil and spiritual belief. How does Exorcist 3 compare with the first film's take on good versus evil? There's a quote from the movie. "This, I believe, there are forces in the universe that struggle to bring us to harm, not because we have sinned, but because we exist." How does the emphasis on psychological horror deepen the film's critique of religious and institutional authority?
What I love about The Exorcist 3 is that most of it is a conversation with inhuman and human evil. There's an interrogation of what evil is, and the motivations between inhuman evil and human evil, in this particular case anyway, overlap because they're both about defiling, people who are good. If one thinks about what motivated the Gemini killer and what is motivating Pazuzu and the devil itself, it's that, right? Defiling God's best. Its best work.
And it's so like what is actually done is like so horrifying, right? Like, it's sort of like, oh, it's not only just this little boy, but he's like decapitated and like savagely crucified. Like it is absolutely brutal. And they talk about like the nature of true evil, right? Like it's one of those things where I feel like it does a better job of getting down to it as opposed to, in the first movie and the book, it's like, oh, here's a crazy thing that happened. It's like this outside force. Ultimately, like, I mean, the Gemini's a guy. Granted, it comes back, but like this is a person that has done these things, and so there's reconciling that. I think George C. Scott's fantastic in it.
Yeah,
I think he's fantastic in everything. I mean, look like Patton or anything like that. But Brad Dourif, like, I think that you get like the modern, maybe not this new film and the Joaquin Phoenix one, but I don't think like the modern sensibility of the Joker, you can have it without his character in Exorcist 3. Like the Heath Ledger style I'm talking about. Yeah, the Brad Dourif, the performance in it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting that you make that comparison. Did you watch Joker 2, by the way?
No, fuck no.
Oh, did you like the first Joker?
I thought it was fine. I liked it better as Taxi Driver and Kings of Comedy, but like it's a King of Comedy, not Kings of Comedy. That is a different movie.
Different film.
Yeah. Where's that crossover? I don't like I don't like musicals. It was the movie least necessary of a sequel that I can think of that wasn't called Blade Runner. You know, like I mean, like
Yeah,
it's
once I saw
not
the
for me.
sequel to that, I was like, whatever this is going to be, it's going to suck.
I mean, Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner is one of my favorite of all time. So I eventually was able to engage with 2049 on its own, just kind of like mentally putting aside the fact that it's allegedly a sequel. I like the B plot way more than the main plot, frankly, but you know, it was fine. I like Villeneuve, but yeah, Joker 2, come on, miss me with that. Like everyone else apparently in the movie going populous, which is fine because that movie should not have been made. And like maybe this like automatic sequel when something does well, like can like die in the crib. But yeah, Exorcist 3. I mean, again, I think it's weird because I think it does almost. So the fact that it's directed by the author of The Exorcist is fascinating. The fact that it did a great job is also fascinating. But I think it would be considered elevated or considered more properly venerated if it just had been called Legion, which I really want to. And it did not. And again, because I think it was the studio execs, right? That were like, it's called The Exorcist. Why do we got to have an exorcism in it? Where is it? What an exorcist scene.
I mean, the Exorcist movie, we have to agree. If you talk about the top horror films and even films of all time, The Exorcist is always on that list. It's like, as Teray was pointing out, it's beautifully shot, that it holds up so well. Again, I rewatched it yesterday. And
it establishes all the tropes too, right? I mean, it's the foundational film.
It is the foundational film,
and draw from the same.
But I feel like it's also like everybody agrees. Everybody agrees it's great, and then it's it's very important history.
So
we all
I
like
get
it.
why you're going to call it Exorcist 3, because not only can you call it Exorcist 3 and feel comfortable about kind of rewriting the wrongs that was the sequel, but you have a very important character tied to it, which is the writer who had a lot of disagreements with Friedkin's vision of his script. Right. So now he gets to kind of write his story the way he wants to see it. The studio can attach a very, very successful IP to it, because The Exorcist comes out in 73. I believe the sequel comes out in 75 or maybe even 76. It comes out pretty quick.
The second one.
The second one, Heretic.
And so by the time they do this Exorcist 3, it's 1990.
Yeah.
So they're trying to bring back this thing that they hope the sins of the second, pun intended, have been absolved.
The heresies of the second, some might say.
It's just time has absolved it. And we're going to give you this new take on it that, for me, when you first watch it, it's very 90s in the sense of it's very bright.
Yeah.
The one difference to me about the late 80s horror and once we get into 90s horror is, first and foremost, people want to stop calling it horror, because horror has such a bad name because of straight-to-video stuff and over-top gore. And so it's shot really bright, like the thrillers are shot of this era. I do think it works really well for this film. There's an unsettling nature for this film that you don't necessarily get in the first one, because, as Teray and you point out, Conan, it's a character study about a priest losing his faith, a mother losing her grip on sanity to some degree because of the patriarchal healthcare system telling her, bitch, it's just you and your goofy kid. There is no such thing as demonic possession. And that movie felt dark in general, even though a lot of it's indoors. This one, a lot of it's outside dialogue.
Well, look at it when they find the crucified body of the kid, right? That's outside, and it's got, like, if I remember right, it's not only Jesus's head instead of his head, but it's in blackface with like nails driven through the eyes.
Oh, it's over the top. Yeah, oh, it's over the top.
Talk about daylight horror, man.
Yeah, no, this movie is over the top, and it pretty much lets you know from the beginning that it's going to be unsettling without being gory.
Right.
But for an audience that's primed on Schwarzenegger movies, nothing happens. And I think one of the things, I'd certainly, The Exorcist had been one of my date litmus test films also. And, one of the things that I had picked up on with women who were, let's say, 10 years younger than me at that time or close to it, it was boring for them. And their sensibilities had shifted. They wanted more action. And I think that with the Exorcist 3 coming out in 1990, the slow pace of it because it takes a long time for anything to happen, and what happens is mostly off screen, except for, of course, the actual. I had thought unnecessary exorcism, but having seen the assembly cut, I appreciate the exorcism, and those reshoots were absolutely essential to making this film work. Because if you've watched Blatty's unadulterated vision, it falls very flat. The cinematography is different. And
Really?
I mean, yes, it's terrible, actually. The cinematography in the asylum, right, where we have the exchange between Kinderman and Brad Dourif, it's totally different. The dialogue's the same. There's no Jason Miller in the original. So it's just 100% Brad Dourif. It does not work. So Blatty's vision without the studio would have been, and I say this as a huge fan of The Exorcist 3, a massive flop.
But can we agree with this though? When you give someone too much control,
yes,
a la Stephen King and Maximum Overdrive.
Oh yeah.
Take the cocaine out of it. It's just you have a lot of control, and you don't know sets.
For someone that isn't a filmmaker. I do agree that it's incredibly improved, and it becomes elevated because of the edits and the additions. I don't think it's bad. It's just not extraordinary. It's fine. And so it's a crazy case of, a lot of times we talk about how things can be changed and everything. Dude, there's like an extended cut of The Fall Guy. You know what I mean? The one that came, which I actually enjoyed. I like that movie, but like, I'm like, why there was 20 minutes added to this? Why? Like, this should have been like a 90-minute movie. But for something like this is a rare case where, like, if you were teaching a class of like, okay, here's how, studio intervention actually made this better. This would be the perfect example. I agree.
One of the few. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's in a rare echelon of like maybe under 10 movies. But for me, it's funny to hear about younger audiences like thinking it's boring, because the whole thing with this one is you get this unbearable sense of dread and tension.
Yeah.
Like this incredible spooky atmosphere, to the point that you get so wrapped up in it that, like when you get to like one of my favorite scenes, which is it's like, oh my, like you can't even believe like it's happening, and it hits you like a punch in the face, and you don't get that if you're not drawn into it.
Right. But you see nothing. Right.
And like the ceiling, which has been emulated everything from like Train Spotting to the freaking Scary Movie, right? Like amazing. And at the time you're like, what? And the reason why is because you're in it, you're immersed in this world, and it draws you along in such a deep and compelling way. And as someone that, again, I've love things that if you're gonna take me on a ride, I'll take the ride with you. I don't want this like super jump cut TikTok world of filmmaking.
Right.
I think it sucks. I think it's boring, and I think people these days when they're making films, they rely on vibes. Cool. Well, why don't you actually establish a vibe instead of just buy some neon lighting?
But would you agree though that because this movie takes place 17 years after the first, and if you saw the first, because as you said, Conan, there's so many bad exorcism movies that come
in
out
between
that have the title exorcism in it.
Yeah,
sure.
Because you can. That people aren't ready for this movie, because this movie also, again, comes out in 1990, before we get movies like Seven, before we get movies like Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
That dude, I think, takes certain beats from the way this movie is put together. And the unease of these movies, like the movies we call thrillers in the early part of the 90s, are just horror movies, but we change it up a little bit.
Yeah, Fincher built a career on it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not that people weren't ready. I think people didn't care.
And
I think a lot of times people they're like, oh, I know what that is. I don't need to see that.
To Ray's point, that's how I felt about it for years, and it was to Ray Reed that was like, Exorcist 3 is really good, and he was having this conversation.
There it goes. You got to have a friend.
And then I was again on this date with this woman, and I didn't think to show her comedy porn, but
but you should have.
Yeah. You didn't have Crash on VHS?
Yeah. Like, what's the most what's the most shocking thing you want to see? And she was like, I'm in
want to see some people all horned up for dismemberment? Sure, here you go.
And she was like, oh, I'm into horror movies. I was like, oh, have you seen Exorcist 3? A buddy told me it's pretty good. And she's like, no, I never seen it. We watched it. And, I'm not trying to be funny. I literally jumped there's a scene everybody's been talking about in the comments that is I've watched Exorcist 3 probably 4 or 5 times.
Get your ass every time though, right?
Every time. The hospital scene is the best use of tension.
Yeah.
And that scare when the thing comes out, it's just like, the fuck.
But watch the assembly cut, because Brad Dourif's performance
very different.
is even different, right?
Yeah, I agree.
They modulate his voice a little bit.
They didn't need to. You don't need to do
theatrical. Watch it, because this definitely is one of those cases where the studio was right.
I did see it one time.
Lighting and the level of even the performance itself of Dourif.
Yeah, I saw it one time, and I agree. It is radically different. Like, again, that's something that if you're teaching a film class, just like show A and B. But I think that if I was to compile, not even like best scenes in horror, definitely best scenes in horror, but just best scenes in general, as far as an effective scene. Here's a way. I don't care about the genre of horror, the proverbial person talking. Well, you need to understand why this scene works the way that it does. Because if you understand how to build dramatic tension in that way, and to do something that people will never be able to forget, if they forget, they'll forget the name of their children, they'll forget their own name, they'll forget their address. Like at the end of the day, right before their deathbed, that scene in Exorcist 3 goes though. Like because it's that affecting, right? It's one of those scenes that like you just always remember, and it would be on like the top 100 scenes of all time for any movie ever. Right? And
I haven't seen that list of. I think Eli Roth did it. The 101 scariest scenes, scariest movies of all time. I haven't seen it.
Same about the movies.
And that's a whole different show. I actually was I was this close to changing it to like the scariest things of all time and maybe going down a few of that list. But I wanted to stay within this genre because I think there's just different avenues we can go when talking about this, especially with the filmmaking. And again, I think this is an interesting point because there's a huge change in horror films in the 90s until Scream. That's how I feel. I don't know. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, before Scream, New Nightmare. But yes,
New Nightmare is the foundation, but that didn't do as well at the box office.
Scream,
a lot of people, they didn't dig it, but Scream for me really is that line for horror cinema where it can return. I do agree that New Nightmare is setting the foundation for what's going to be Scream.
Yeah, because the sensibility is like at some point things have to become meta-contextual, right? This is putting the fans on the screen as well and taking the same things that people who have seen these kinds of movies over the years, up to including like, don't go in that room. What are you doing? Like, like that kind of thing, and applying it meta-contextually to find a new way to tell a story. And the first Scream, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And I have lots of thoughts about the Scream franchise, not the least of which is they never should have made more than one ever.
I mean, that's the way Craven felt about Nightmare on Elm Street. It's over at the end.
I mean, look, I like a few of those sequels. I think New Nightmare is more. I think I like it and I respect it, I think, more than I love it. But like, there's no Scream without New Nightmare. And
I 100% agree.
And I think that at the time it was very effective of a way. Let's find we know the genre and all the things that it does. We've been dealing with it so long. We've been watching these movies for so long. What can we do that's different? Which, by the way, people ask the opposite of that now. How can we like make this feel like something you already know? How can we make this feel like Dario Argento? How can we make this feel like Michael Mann?
Yeah.
I mean, to the point. Yeah, exactly. Where you have like people like oh, what can we do to make this look like David Lynch? Look, man, you can try to make things look like David Lynch all you want. Ain't gonna be no David Lynch film. No way.
Well, doesn't that really speak to this way that we're just reproducing culture? Mark Fisher talks about this in Ghosts of My Life, I believe, the kind of reproduction of culture. I'm currently writing about it for Revol Press. My take on hair metal is not that it was a new thing, but that it's a rehashing of what was called at the time classic rock. And if you look at what I think is the first hair metal record of the 80s, it's Blizzard of Oz. It's not Too Fast for Love or even Metal Health. It's Blizzard of Oz because of the Randy Rhoads connection, and a lot of those riffs were throwaway Quiet Riot riffs, and Rhoads didn't like Black Sabbath. So and what comes after that is a rehashing
podcast based on my reaction to what you just said, by the way, but I'm gonna let you finish. So And I say that as not a fan of hair metal at all, but I think it's an interesting conceit. So,
and what comes after what people
also keep Randy Rhodes' name out of your mouth. Thank you.
That's what she
I mean,
said.
it's true. He didn't like that. He didn't want an audition. But when you also look at the genre that I don't believe killed it, they say it's killed by grunge, and you and I have had this conversation over and over again.
We sure have.
That's a rehashing of stoner rock and hardcore punk, and with a new title on it. And even if you go and say, well,
hard rock with a punk rock sensibility, basically.
Sure,
that's
and,
really
and even if you say, well, what really killed it is Guns N' Roses and that new batch of unabashed raw rockers from 1987, Guns N' Roses, LA Guns, Faster Pussycat, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, but that's just the Rolling Stones turned to 11. This is
with
all
glam outfits.
Yeah, it's not. There's nothing different coming out with this production. That's another reason why I try to pick these films, because for me, these were some of the films that actually were very different takes on a certain genre that take you on very different rides that don't feel comfortable.
Well, okay, so on that, and this has been shouted out multiple times in the comments, and I do agree with it, that when you think of, when I was looking at that list of like the best 20 possession movies, it's all Christian possession, basically more or less some take on The Exorcist. Oh, it's The Exorcist, but with Mel Gibson for some reason, like whatever, like all of these different things where it's like, no, you're basically telling the same sort of stories. One of the most interesting movies about possession for me in the last 10 years, Hereditary.
Yes.
But it's not a Christian myth.
Yeah,
at all. But I think first of all, it's one of the most effective horror movies of the past 10 years. And it's definitely one of the best possession movies. The movie Possession, the Zulaski movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, but it doesn't
the husband
fit.
Wife movie.
Yes, Isabel Johnny
Okay, yeah,
and Sam Neill. It's absolutely incredible, but it's not traditionally an exorcism movie, because the possession part of it isn't just like, oh, possessed by an entity. It's like possession is trying to possess another person, from a relationship and whatnot.
Yeah,
and it's also just insane cinema that's insane. Should be discussed, not on this show. But Hereditary, where was Hereditary on that list? Do you see and all those movies had the word exorcism in, because they're like, oh, these little piggies got to know that we're talking about about demons and the power of Christ is going to compel you and all that, because that's how effective The Exorcist was. It defining a genre full of hacky trash from the trash can, if you ask me, with rare exceptions.
Well, Jason, I was thinking from the start that I would have placed Hereditary on rather than Late Night with the Devil, which I enjoyed, but it didn't have the effect of Hereditary. And one of the reasons that
I also didn't like Hereditary.
Interesting. Well,
it is divisive.
That I think is really powerful about Hereditary, as you know. I mean, it is a real film, much like The Exorcist.
Yeah.
There's a shit ton of character development.
Yeah.
The original screenplay was simply about a family enduring grief. And of course, the writer couldn't get any takers for it. So he said, well, horror is popular. Let me turn this film that's about grief into a horror story. And it's brutal. I just watched it last night, coincidentally, and brutal from the start. Right. If you've experienced grief and loss, before you get to the matter of demonic, I almost said oppression, but demonic possession.
My demons are being repressed.
Right. But before you get to that, it's already horrifying.
And it does innovate in one very specific way, which is you're telling the story of a sacrifice, and you're telling the story from the perspective of the people being sacrificed.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you will about Ari Aster. I think Beau is Afraid is genius, personally, but I understand where people are like, yo, I cannot do a 3-hour panic attack. I understand.
I haven't seen it.
Midsommar, I like it. I like it better personally than The Wicker Man, which I'm not a big fan of, but I understand that's divisive as well. But from Hereditary, the idea of telling this very compelling story again, and you're right, Trey, it is about grief, right? And it's about dealing with that. And it's about how that manifests for different people. And it's done so eloquently and so well. And then it has, midway through, it has one of the biggest jump scares since The Exorcist 3 and the scissors, where you're like, what the whoa, my God. Yeah.
That was what kind of woke me up when I watched it. Maybe I tried to watch it a few times. Each time I'm like, I just don't care.
Well,
some people never get past that too.
And you know my problem is, seriously, I'm too much of a piece of shit, where sometimes I'm like, I hate the people that like it. It's
Wow.
one
like
of those for
LA
me, too.
fans.
All right,
Yeah,
JD
yeah,
Michael.
yeah.
Sure.
But
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not gonna lie and be like I'm not like that. So like sometimes I'm like, oh, you like them? Okay.
It's really good. But again, the turnaround, like the reveal of like what you have been watching, and then what you think you've been watching, and then what it is at the end is truly remarkable. Whether you enjoy the movie, enjoy the narrative or not, like respect must be given for Aster for turning something that like has 0.0% innovation for like 35 years and doing something different with it.
Well, and it's a story of an adult child's unsatisfying relationship with a parent who has just passed from beginning to end, and
Right.
considering how it ends, it's a nice window onto why that relationship was so unsatisfying, right? The mom, Tony Collette's mom, was in a coven that ultimately sacrificed her whole family, posthumously, to breathe literal life into a demon.
Yeah, and then it's sort of like, all right, is this a happy ending? I guess it depends on who you are, you know.
If you're pro demon, it's a happy.
If you're
pro demon,
yeah, exactly. Talk about.
I guess that could be said
demon
for Paranormal Activity franchise too.
The demon repression has been lifted. Like demons are
is.
ascended. Well, I mean, yeah, if you're in that coven, it's great. It's aces, right? It's like,
Right.
but also Tony Collette robbed because people do
Yep.
not like to give Oscar nominations for horror, and they will go
Just
out
call
talking
it a
about
thriller.
that today. Yep.
Well,
well,
she
that's
is
also
astounding in this.
That's another problem I have
Astounding.
with this idea of elevated horror.
Mm-hmm.
I am with Carpenter on like, what the fuck is elevated horror?
It's
either horror or it's not.
It's a term almost meant to divide people, because there's a bunch of people that are going to be like, oh, that's something I don't like because I like meat and potatoes storytelling, et cetera, et cetera. and it's stupid because it's one of those things where like, okay, who are you gaining by calling it this? Like people that like
Thank you.
don't look at anything that's not on the Criterion channel. I love the Criterion channel, by the way. But like, yeah, I mean, it's something that like people assume that, oh, that's going to be something that's not enjoyable. That's going to be something that like is going to feel like eating my vegetables. Okay, no, that's not what that means. It shouldn't be anyway. But like this idea of
That's
like
not what Michelle Obama said.
Nice one. Good. Yeah. Let her up. Let her up.
Watch your Hereditary and your Exorcist 3 Legion, because that's
there you
good
go.
for you.
Look, if you haven't seen Exorcist 3, before moving on to the next one, first of all, Conan and Teray, can I keep you guys for a little bit so we can finish the next two?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Teray, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you haven't seen Exorcist 3, please check it out and leave a comment on what you think of the movie, especially if you're watching it after this. Some of the Jason movie reviews that I give, people have said, oh, they went and watched the movie. My Death Wish 4, people have put it on their list.
Look at that.
Wow.
So my review of the movie, I believe it's called Switch, that I saw on Tubi.
Yeah.
Was it Tubi Core?
To my Tubi movie reviews, people have gone and watched those movies.
I had someone call and say, is that the Tubi Core movie? I'm like, I know exactly what you mean.
Have you seen The Lost Empire, Conan or Teray?
No. But let me throw this out before we move on.
Yeah, let's change the subject immediately. Yes. Good idea.
This is still Exorcist 3. There's a right-wing version of the Exorcist 3 that's pretty new, called Nefarious, and it's the same basic idea. It's many of the same tropes, but it is a death row inmate who I think is trying to get out of execution by way of insanity, or at least there's a suggestion that he's insane. So there's a dialogue between the death row inmate who says he's possessed, right, and a psychologist, and their exchange about evil and what it is and whether or not this guy is possessed is really interesting, kind of the way that The Exorcist 3 is, except it has all the tropes, the things that are evil in this film are things that we would associate with progressive politics by and large. And so it's not clear in the moment, from the very start, the political slant of the film, but it becomes clear as the dialogue unfolds. And then, to idiot-proof it, Glenn Beck shows up. So it is actually pretty well done for what it is, and is an interesting window onto the Christian right that's worth checking out.
It's also Sean Patrick Flannery in it, who Boondock Saints, which is hilarious because that dude is like, his career has just been, wow, amazing. That looks. that looks astoundingly not for me. Is the best way that I'll put it.
I had a feeling about it, kind of like I did when I watched The Devil's Advocate, though, which is a film I kind of like.
Devil's Advocate's great.
But what I liked about The Devil's Advocate, or at least at the time, what I would have said is I would have liked it better if I watched it 20 years from now, right? If I were 26 or however old I was when it came out, 20 years from when it had come out, because then I would have a window onto the Christian right that was in my rearview mirror. Instead, what The Devil's Advocate gave me was a window onto the Christian right in real time, right? And though Eddie Barzoon has always reminded me of President Trump, I look physically and the type, which has its own interesting elements. There's a discomfort I feel when I watch The Devil's Advocate as much as I like it, except for the CGI, which I can't stand, because it is encapsulating in real time and not with a critical eye what the Christian right is all about in that moment, what they associate with evil, ecumenicism, cosmopolitanism, being a polyglot even is something. Oh, defense attorneys. Yeah. Defense attorneys are evil.
Yeah,
but not prosecutors.
But
prosecutors are holy.
That's been the greatest post Perry Mason, right? Because we forget Perry Mason was a defense attorney, right? And a lot of those early court shows from the 50s and 60s, it's about defense attorneys.
Yeah.
Winning these cases.
The state has more power than any individual who's not a millionaire.
And that's a fascinating topic and a longer one that we probably have time to get into. I will say, have you seen Angel Heart 87?
Oh God, yeah. How many times?
Yeah, that's Lisa Bonet. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Oops.
De Niro's devil, very good in that.
That's one of the most frightening devils to me. But let's get into this movie that might be a shocker for some on this list. Maybe Conan. This is a.
Have you seen this? Yeah, boobs. Great. No. Yeah, all right.
I could beat around the bush and talk about cinematography and Mickey Rourke's portrayal and the beauty of shooting in Louisiana and New Orleans. I could talk about all that, or I could talk about why everybody else is excited to see it. Was the nude scene of Denise Huxtable.
Hey, I saw Action Jackson for another Denise Vanity. So
Denise Williams.
I was satisfied. Oh damn! I can't remember her real last name.
Anyway,
let's get to the meat of the matter.
Okay, the Exorcism, the intersection of science and faith. The courtroom scenes in The Exorcism of Emily Rose bring up questions of mental illness, first demonic possession. What stance, if any, does the film take on the legitimacy of religious practices versus scientific explanations? Quote from the film: "God is here in this courtroom," a statement that blurs the separation of church and state and raises questions on institutional bias. And how does the film use the true story label to create ambiguity in the audience's understanding of possession and the limits of legal authority? Conan Neutron, you probably have a lot to say.
I saw this in the theater, and I think Laura Linney, speaking of defense attorneys, she's really great in this. And I think ultimately, I think the courtroom stuff is probably more interesting than the actual exorcism stuff.
Agreed.
100%.
But it was something that, if you think about all these films and all these events that happen in films, like, it absolutely makes sense. It's like, what? There was no post-event litigation when people are literally dead. Like, that seems crazy. So the fact that they approach it from that perspective, that was interesting, because the priest gets arrested on suspicion of murder. Right. And it was like, well, no, but it was an exorcism. And it was like, yeah, cool. But like, that is actually murder. We don't believe in that. That's not real. And I think that I think it's important within the genre of this type of movie. I don't think it's an amazing movie. I think it's pretty good, though. Like, I think it's like, I can't remember. I was mad at it for some reason after I saw it, but it's been too long. I don't remember why.
It's
but
one of those movies that made me go look for the real case. I don't know if you were the same way.
Yeah, where you're like, well, what actually happened? Because this is because again they did a big push for it's ripped from the headlines and like, well, is it really? Okay, but like, but I like the idea of telling that story from what happens afterwards, right? Like where it's like, no, there's someone that's dead, and like if your perspective, especially if you're someone, look at me, I'm something of a rationalist myself. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I think it's all like that's up there with like Thor's hammer and stuff like that. None of that is real at all. But I unless someone literally asks me, I usually keep that opinion to myself.
I mean,
like, that's why I could never say I'm just an atheist, because it would be legally impossible for me to do that.
Going back to the foundational film, The Exorcist, there's a death in that.
Somebody
right?
dies.
The priest dies, and at the end, and the other man jumps out of a window
first, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Two priests die. One man, is dead,
No,
and then
three
another
people
priest
die.
jumps out of a window,
Two
right?
priests die, and then Burke, the director, dies first. Burke,
Oh,
the
that's
director,
right.
is the first. He's killed by Reagan.
And it's kind of one of those things where you shrug your shoulders at the end. The little girl smiles and kisses the one surviving priest, and that's just the end of the story.
Yeah,
and a lot of these movies,
that stair scene was wild. Okay,
Yes. But here's a movie that says, okay, what happens if you really believe your child is possessed by a demon, and they're not? They're going through a psychotic break. They're having some sort of mental issue. And what happens if you treat this mental issue? Because the real story
in Germany, right?
I believe it's in Germany. There is a German movie based off the real story.
Annalise?
Is that what it was called? I don't remember the name.
I believe that was her name. But don't do it.
But that movie talks about how that girl was a divinity student, I believe, of some kind.
Right.
So that's why she could speak Aramaic. Like she did learn it in school. And I don't remember off the top of my head if they mentioned that in Emily Rose, like the
checklist,
the recordings and everything that you hear of her speaking these different languages. I believe the real story is she was quoting Hitler with an Austrian accent. And that's where the whole idea of demonic possession came.
But did she have a fucked up mustache like you?
Wow.
I gotta shave it all now. Well,
Michael Jordan had it too. He tried to bring it back.
Bring it back.
What a thing to want to bring back, though, right?
He wanted to bring
Yeah,
back
look,
sex.
I think Chaplin felt he had it first. Like this asshole. I mean, that's why he made The Great Dictator, arguably, but I think there's a cool quote. I actually looked it up, but the demons exist whether you believe in them or not. That's what the priest is saying, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, he could also say the demons do not exist whether you believe in them or not, because belief by definition stands outside of proof. If you can prove it, you don't need to believe it. That for me sums up this movie, because a lot of people, said it was like the equivalent of Miracle on 34th Street for the God's Not Dead set, like where it's like, wow.
Whoa.
Like it caught flack at the time too, and justifiably.
Teray, what say you on that last comment that Conan threw out there?
Well, I mean, isn't that what The Exorcist did too, though? I mean, like most of the tropes that you get in Emily Rose, and I saw Emily Rose like Conan in the theater. My then girlfriend, now wife, and I saw it together, and I will say one of the scary elements of it was I started waking up at 3 a.m. and I bet I had always woken up at 3 a.m. But once I would wake up at 3 a.m. after I saw that film, oh shit, is the devil in the room? But anyway,
yeah.
That's the seeded planet with me, and I think my wife had the same reaction. But I don't know, as much as I appreciate the film for what it is, I don't know that it does anything that The Exorcist and The Exorcist 3 didn't already do, right? I mean, you take the elements of The Exorcist 3 and you bring it now into the courtroom. So rather than a private conversation between a detective, a demon, and a serial killer, now you've got the demon on trial, or technically the priest, but the idea of the demon and the devil is on trial. And then, of course, we get those flashback scenes to the exorcisms of Emily Rose. And, Jennifer Carpenter apparently is a contortionist. It was kind of weird to see her go from Dexter's sister to a possessed German girl.
One of the
all
greatest
in the
metal
same
screams
theater.
of all time, too. By the way.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my
She did a
God,
nice
her
job.
scream is great.
But I don't know the exorcisms on the whole, at least what she was going through on the whole didn't really seem that grand. So I did appreciate the fact that there remained ambiguity about whether or not she was mentally ill or whether or not she was possessed, right? That I think they did a nice job of. I do appreciate the film. I would have put Hereditary on the list ahead of this one because it's kind of scary, at least at 3 a.m. But I don't know how scary it is, and I don't know that it breaks a lot of new ground. But to the point about the based on the true story tagline, which I think it's better understood as inspired by a true story. That certainly helped to give it some heft. But
I
the
think
same is true of the Exorcism.
The based on the
Sorry,
true story
yeah,
thing
The
kind of
Exorcist.
gets a new life around the time of this movie because you get it with The Strangers too, which is extremely
Oh sure. Yeah.
Manson
Yeah.
murders.
loosely based on the Manson
Yeah.
family
It's
and the
very
guy's
loose.
actual living in a or going to vacation or something in a place where there's a lot of kind of like where I live, where a lot of people don't live in the homes in their second homes, so you could be here and be houses will be vacant. Actually, recently someone came, I don't know how they got in and knocked on my door super randomly. And was like, "Hey, I was just seeing if you were home. You had any money?" I was like, no, no, I don't.
But I mean, that tagline has been around forever. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on a true story, and it was Ed Gein, right? So
Well, exactly.
But you don't get it
far
with the,
removed.
But the thing is, you don't get it following that, right? Halloween isn't based on a true story.
No.
Friday the 13th isn't based on a true story because you don't need it.
Yeah, well, but it's there's definitely a beat to it. It looked like Blair Witch Project, right? Like, I mean, they were able to perpetuate that myth like longer than they probably should have because the internet, as we know it now, wasn't the internet then, and to the point that they had like the actual people like stay home, don't go out and promote the movie. We need people to like think this is real, which is crazy to think about now because that would never happen now. It was just like a product of its time. But the based on does so much heavy lifting in the based on true story.
Yeah.
Like, well, how much is it based on? Like, look. There's all kinds of things you say, like right, exactly that, and they took that to the comic excess because those guys were who are brilliant were kind of lampooning and mocking that aspect of quote unquote storytelling that somehow airs legitimacy and importance if it's based on a true story. Well, like you don't have to say what story it was based on, and again they took it to like comic level for that. But I think the problem I have with Exorcism of Emily Rose, I haven't. This is one I have not seen in like literal years. At the end of it, I was like, it almost feels like an ad for Christianity to a certain degree. And like again, as someone who's irreligious, consider myself a secular humanist, like I just remember being kind of like annoyed because it was like, all right, so I get it. Like, if you're dealing with any kind of mythos, any kind of religious mythos, you're going to have to deal with the trappings and the fact that at a certain point, people are allowed to state their claim for what they believe is true. And again, in their beliefs. And I think there's a lot of that that's well represented. But I think at the end of it, the viewer is meant to be like, oh, yeah, well, they were right. That was real. Like, well, if you're going to do that, like burden of proof, like look at something done better. Anatomy of a Murder. Right. Like if you're really doing something like that, you should leave the audience with questions they can answer for themselves rather than telling them the answer.
Yeah.
So,
but again, I think The Exorcist was an ad for Christianity too. I mean, it had such shock value that maybe people in the moment in the theater, unlike Emily Rose, where I think it's transparent, right? Didn't see it that way, but in the aftermath, they certainly did. And in making the case that there is inhuman, real evil that requires protection from God, right? There's nothing, you can't go to the cops, you can't get a defense attorney, you can't buy a gun, but the only way that you can protect yourself from this real evil that is eternal is through religion of one sort or another, Catholicism or some other form of Christianity. It's the same thing that Emily Rose is doing, just explicitly.
Yeah, and I think that's that one. I feel the same way about that too. When we talked about it last year, Moving Extravaganza, I brought up that same point that like I don't seek out these movies because again, like first of all, there's a glut of them, and then most of them are terrible. But then also like I don't in this country. Christianity is everywhere, whether you acknowledge it or not, or acknowledge, and it gets. I'm sorry, I believe everyone should believe whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt other people, but it gets annoying. It gets really annoying. So it's not something I'm seeking out because of that. So why does The Exorcist work for me and Exorcism of Emily Rose is okay, but kind of tiresome? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I mean, one's a better movie.
Well,
that's what I'll go away with. They're different though. The courtroom aspect is cool though. That is.
We've
cool.
all watched South Park, I assume, at some point. And
right.
way back in the day, when South Park was still pretty new and cutting edge, there was a scene where Kyle, who's always struggled with being a lonely Jew at Christmas and other times of the year, discovers that in order to seek salvation, he needs to eat crackers and drink wine. And he goes home to his parents, and his mom says, "Oh, us Jews don't believe in the devil, booby. That's just something that Christians made up to scare them into believing in God." There's an element of truth to that in a way, right? I mean, it's over the top. It's an over the top characterization of the role of the devil in Christian life. But for my Jewish friends, ultimately who don't like these possession films, that's exactly what they come down to, right? I mean, they come down to the idea that while there may be evil in the world, the point of the religion is not to be scared into worshiping God, right? And these films sort of replicate that narrative that you want to put the fear of the devil in you to enjoy to bask in the light of God, or however they might put it, rather than going through the checklist of what's purportedly good about Christianity.
Well, let's move on to the next movie, and I'll tell you why I put it on this list. And that's fucking Hereditary. Late Night with the Devil, media as modern Exorcist. There you go. I'm in media. This is media.
I think that's cool, and that is something that the first thing I thought of when I saw it was like, wow, that's cool. I haven't seen this aspect of this.
The film uses the setting of a 1970s talk show to create a new kind of exorcism narrative. What critique is offered here of sensationalized media, particularly its role in manipulating audiences through moral panic? Quote from the film, "We've got demons in the studio tonight, folks," highlighting how the media exploits societal fears for entertainment. How does this film use its unique setting to both honor and reinvent genre convictions? Terrell, I'll let you go first since you had so much fucking bullshit to say about it.
What? I like Late Night with the Devil. I thought Late Night with the Devil was fine, but I didn't like it as much as you. Only because I couldn't lose myself in the narrative. It kind of felt like a Tales from the Crypt episode.
Okay, but that's not what the question I was asking you. I didn't ask you about your fucking feelings about the film.
Well, that was less of a feeling than more of an analysis.
You must want me to walk all the way to Illinois, huh?
Well, I mean, it's part of your fitness regimen.
Get them steps in. Yeah, exactly.
A balanced diet, a rigorous exercise routine. Patrick Bateman.
Exactly. Yeah.
So wait, what's the question about the media and the devil and all that
stuff? Well, how the media helps shape societal fears. The media plays an extremely important role in the satanic panic, which happens a little kind of around this time, because it actually does happen in the 70s with the book Michelle Remembers, and also with a very popular film called Sybil, to give people an idea of how powerful media was. When I say media, I mean like movies and not just the news. Sybil was seen by about a third of America. I want people to think about that for a second. Most of the shows people think are popular are only popular in their own personal
that niche, that universe, that balkanized universe.
Because you get to have it shot back to you.
The fact that you're annoyed by Hereditary and hearing about it all the time, you are in like a small circle of people that even give a damn about like that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
So the
Grandmama does not have an opinion on Hereditary.
This idea of demonic possession, especially the era it's supposed to take place in, which is like the late 70s, it for me is really hitting home, because around the same time I saw this movie, I just finished a book called We Believe the Children, about the Satanic Panic and watched. I had finally got, and I was getting the filmmakers on, and then I think the movie didn't do well, so they just don't do press anymore. Called Satan Wants You, and it's actually about the book Michelle Remembers, which kind of sets in motion a lot of these panics and the way they were portrayed by media. So there is this idea that media does help us cast out fears in general. I mean, we literally live in this world currently, especially Conan and I doing these podcasts, where people kind of want you to yell the things at the bad people in the power of Christ compels you kind of way. Like, you have to say this is bad. This person is bad.
Say the words.
So for me, that's why this movie really hits home and makes sense to put on this show more than the fucking movie like Hereditary.
Well, there
you go. You're welcome.
That was a great explanation, and there is a kind of detachment between the subjects and the audience with regard to evil, right? Evil's in the middle, and framing it the way that they do is big question mark glibly as to whether or not this is, when they say the devil will be with us or a demon will be with us this evening, or however they put it, making light of the situation, right? Makes it just entertainment. And of course, as the story unfolds, they're making light at their own, the producers and of course the hosts are making light of evil at their own expense. It's not a deep observation. It just is what it is about the film.
No, but I think it's important to mention. Also, I think that there's a great use of like the multiple camera styles. Like it's supposed to be like, there's like a documentary like being filmed at the same time, right? And like which you could shoot holes in like what the logistics of that would entail. But I think it does a great job of evoking. Yes, but it evokes the feel of a 1970s late night set, right? Which is if you're gonna have like, okay, what if Exorcism, but on like a late night TV show, you better be able to evoke the feel of a 1970s late night set. So you got good atmosphere. Was it David? How do you say his last name?
I can't even. I can.
Dasmalchian.
He's like, is he one of those? Is he one of those Kardashians?
David Kardashian. Yeah. No, but he's like that guy actor. Right, like he's a guy that you see him and you're like, oh, he's playing this like weird little freak, or like this guy that's like interesting. And it's cool to see him as a lead because I think he's really good in this.
He's great. He loves horror too. I like people that like the genre when they're in the movie. Like what's the guy that's always in the Sam Raimi movies? I can't think of his name.
Bruce Campbell.
Yeah,
Bruce Campbell. Like I love Bruce Campbell in certain movies because it's like he's having a good time.
And you can Fargo too. By the way.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Maybe the thing that I like best about it is it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's like 93 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's if you're gonna make like a genre movie that like, hey, we're doing this with like the genre and like we're trying to like do this thing. Cool. Stop making 2 hours the default. Yeah. And I say this as like, look, man, one of my favorite movies Until the End of the World. It's that movie's like 5 hours long, right? But the thing is, most of these films can't sustain it. So it's weird to me that people's attention span has been grinded down to nothing because of the Instagram reels and TikTokification of media. That you also have people, God damn, I might have liked that Matt Reeves Batman if it was an hour shorter. Like it's like, how is this 3 hours? Like, what are we trying to do here? You think you're putting Lawrence of Arabia together? You are not, man. It's a freaking Batman movie. Like, what are we doing? So the fact that Late Night with the Devil, 93 minutes, great. That's perfect. And again, I think it would be one note if it was just like, hey, like what's the what's the English movie where they tried to do something like kind of similar with this in like the early 90s. You know what I'm talking about?
Ghostwatch.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Ghostwatch. I saw that. Yeah.
Ghostwatch.
Like,
that was kind of good.
It's just cool, but the idea of like, oh no, we're showing the behind the scenes stuff, which is a modern construct, right? We're used to seeing that in terms of like, like look at 30 Rock or something along those lines, but you don't see it in like a horror movie normally.
No.
So you get to see like, oh, well, they throw out a commercial and like this thing happens, and then like they're like freaking out about it. Oh, we can't find so and so. All that works for me, and that's interesting and cool and new. I liked it. I thought it was a big swing. I think it was like the best movie of the year? No, not at all. But I enjoyed it. I just feel like horror in general. So two things can be true. I can think that the term elevated horror is stupid and almost purposely dismissive. And I can also think that most horror movies are hacky and boring these days.
Sure.
And if this is quote unquote elevated horror, great, give me more. I want more movies like this and Barbarian and Get Out.
They're
and,
getting back to practical effects in this film, right? There's not a
Yeah.
lot of CGI. It's very, very little. Number two,
At the end.
and it's very little at the end.
Yeah.
Another thing that I really loved about this movie is it's using kind of real people.
Right.
The skeptic is based off a real man to the point where they got the actor to look just like the real person that I believe died a few years ago. I could be wrong. And he was
based on a true story.
Yeah, a closeted gay man that was exposing not just magicians, but kind of these fake fortune tellers that would do this thing. This is kind of a common thing that I don't know if it still happens on TV, because I don't think TV has the same power it had, even 15 years ago, to bring on psychics and have them be kind of important people. Because now you don't need to have a special power to be famous. You can literally just have a vagina and say that you're making food naturally, and that's it. That's all you need. That's all you need, and you can be have a massive internet platform. Or you can have a penis and just say that you hate women. Like, it's just that easy. Just that easy. But that character, I found very fascinating, because in his denial of everything, and very arrogantly, he was covering for the fact that he was a Satanist.
Yeah.
And what happens when the girl reveals herself to be the devil? He drops to his knees and gives
her the check.
Right. But he's also like, I am yours, because he's a Satanist. He's a closeted Satanist the whole time. The only thing he really believed in was kind of the power of the devil, if you will, which I found kind of interesting. And he also kind of sells himself for evil and some sort of fame, in a way that I see a lot of people, even in this media milieu, do as well. They can't wait to pledge their allegiance to the thing that they claim they hate so much, which is the right.
Well, the reason it kind of fell flat for me, even as I enjoyed it, is that because it's on the spectrum of found footage, it's not found footage, but this broadcast only aired once. So now we're going to air it for a generalist audience decades later, is that everyone's in character almost all the time, right? That everyone has their stage persona on. We never get to see them, with the exception of, was he a psychologist with the little girl?
The woman?
The woman,
and
the possessed little girl, but everyone else, the debunker, the medium, of course, the host, they're all in their kind of over the top character mode. And so the humanity of who these people are, since they're all in performative mode because of the window that we have onto them, doesn't really come through as well for me. It's almost like watching Star Trek Next Generation, where everyone's just kind of emotionless in that show. So I probably shouldn't piss on Star Trek Next Generation in that way, but you get the point, right? That you have a public persona, you have a stage persona, and you have who you are privately. And what we get is everyone's stage persona. What we don't get is who they are privately. And so they don't seem like people. They just seem like characters.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a valid point. I think that also folks such as ourselves, Jason, you and I, like I can see where we'd be drawn to this, right? Like, when do you get to see aspects of media and media production, like the back end of it, like the part that nobody thinks about in a genre like this? Never. It's never done. So obviously it's interesting, but I think, Trey, you got a good point. I mean, there's not a lot of humanity to the humans.
Well, if we got more, if they didn't do it in a kind of found footage kind of way, we would have been able to see more of them behind the scenes.
But it also would destroy the conceit of what they're trying to do
I think for me, the movie works real well because it moves fast. It
see that 93 minutes thing, right?
That doesn't feel it didn't feel like 93 minutes. It felt like 30 minutes. It really does.
It moves right along. Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Again, I for me, it's done well, and maybe because some of the reveals in that movie, again, like the reveal of the skeptic for me is like the person in this world that is just so antithetical to America that their politics is America bad. That becomes their politics. You're going to be right. You're going to be right a lot of the
man.
times with America bad politics. But when you see people say things like, I'm for any other nation that isn't the United States, but the United States is such a poison nation, it's like, well, that's a very overly simplistic way to view the world.
Let's drill down into
almost,
that.
An almost adolescent way to view the world. And it's nihilistic. And but
it becomes a dogma in and of itself, right? It's the same thing I have with people that are like atheists.
That's the way that guy felt to me, Conan. So for me, watching that guy's head blow up is all these dudes that kind of have this overly simplistic America bad politics, then bowing to Putin, like, Putin, I am here to serve thee, and then just getting sent to
got.
But
great.
But let's roll back for a second, because I would argue that what makes good horror is that you have very believable human characters in what are basically unbelievable circumstances. And what makes it possible to believe that Toni Collette could cut her head off, what makes it possible to believe that Reagan can puke out, bile, but pea soup. What makes it possible to believe that Kinderman can have a conversation with a demon and an executed serial killer is that the characters are somewhat fleshed out human beings, right? These are people you can relate to in some way. And that's what brings it down to earth and makes it possible to suspend, again, disbelief. If what you have is character and disbelief in the context of an exorcism film or genre is essential, right? Suspending disbelief is essential. But in Late Night with the Devil, since everyone is a character, because they're in character, because they are performing, then you miss that human piece, which undercuts some of the horror to a degree. And I say this as one who does enjoy the film, and I like it very much and have watched it a few times. And it's only been out since 2024.
But that's what Terry, that's why I love it, because we live in a world where everyone is in character. And
they're all trying to get clicks. They're trying to get views.
They're trying. It's so relatable to me, because you're taking this 70s thing and you're really putting a very 2024 spin on it. And maybe this is where you and I diverge in our appreciation for this film. For me, watching the little girl constantly in character, right? And even the psychologist agree to sacrifice this little girl for the camera. The fact that the guy has sacrificed his own wife for fame, right? Like this is all shit that for me is a world that we're in right now, where people have sacrificed their lives for attention. There's people that are way bigger than us. Let's just take it. This motherfucker's never going to watch the show. I don't give a shit. Take a guy like Hassan, for example, Hassan Piker. And this isn't a dig on him as a man or anything he says politically, because I don't really care. It's more the fact that your entire life is in front of a camera.
Yeah. And
everything you do, I'm going to a restaurant. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Look at me do this. There's a guy here sitting next to me. I can't fucking look at him. We're both looking at the screen. That's how disconnected I am from even conversation when people are literally sitting next to me in a goddamn room, right? Everything in this cat's life is performative.
Right.
And so many people are like that. Let's take a picture. Look how much fun we're having. Yeah. We're always performing. So to show a horror movie, the horror of the performative, for me, that's what I took from it. So I was constantly like,
the Faustian bargains as a theme are not new. And in general, those people we were talking about, I don't care what happens to them, right? Because in life, because they have opted to not be people, right? They opted to commodify themselves. And all we get is the commodified versions of the character. So it's harder for me to connect with them because they have commodified themselves.
No, she's the anti-Reagan. She is the anti-Linda Blair Reagan. She's the anti-Linda Blair Reagan, because Linda Blair Reagan, you have those 40 minutes of the adorable cuteness. This little girl is odd from the beginning. From the jump.
If I could just real quick jump into that other point, I think that actually, I was trying to reconcile something this week. I have shows coming up, right? We got a couple shows with God Boys playing Columbus. We're playing Louisville. I'm just gonna drop these. Notice how I'm just so eloquently putting the plug. Right? And we're playing with Dead Bob and Lung in St. Paul and Chicago. And I was thinking today that I was like, I haven't been like bumping these shows enough in promo, because what I've been doing is like, we've been going hard, moving extravaganza with these vampire movies. We did From Dusk Till Dawn on Tuesday. Great. And there's so much stuff to promote that I'm like, I'm not promoting this other stuff, which is like ostensibly my main thing, enough. And I was thinking, like, what a weird modern construct that is. That, like, I'm like, oh, well, okay, if I put up some from my shows, am I going to take away from this Protonic Reversal episode, this Moving Extravaganza episode? If I put up a random thing, I saw a lawn the other day that just had the words "okay" spray painted on the grass, and I was like, that's weird. So I put that up on Instagram, and then after I said it, it was like, oh, I should have like thought about the fact that like that's going to get more likes than like, the show promo I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's a crazy thing to think about. So I think it's hard relatable when you think of this influencer culture. And again, like everyone being the product as well. I think that you have this guy that's like, this is the 1970s model. The show's about to be like taken off the air. Of course, he's going to do whatever he can to be successful at it. But it's so gross because I don't like being the product. I know I have a background that has my show, literally that has my name, just like the band that also has my name in it. But there are reasons and rationale beyond it. And it's not that I'm a raging egomaniac, but I don't like that. I like things being siloed, and the thing can be its own thing. It can stand on its own. It isn't like constantly being thrown in your face. Hey, we're here at Starbucks, Protonic Reversal. Like, oh my God. Like, Bud's wire me on that one. But like, I think that was the thing that all worked. And I think that's why, Jason, one thing I noticed is people that do shows, like the star ratings, like one higher for them on this movie, because it's one of the only things that actually has addressed that isn't uber cringe, because they have things that are like trying to lampoon influencers and whatever. It's universally terrible. It's trash from the trash can. Nobody either understands it or they're prioritizing the different things, which is to say that we celebrate the individual without celebrating the needs of the individual now. And that is, first of all, not sustainable. And secondly, harder to depict in film.
Terrain.
What can I say? I mean, there's a reason I think that the DSM took narcissism, removed narcissism from the list of personality disorders a dozen years ago. And I think it comes down to the fact that if we are selecting for narcissism, if we're promoting it as a society, how is it a disorder, right? It's now normative.
Dun, 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 dun.
And bam, it's neoliberalism. There you go.
That's hey. What have I been talking about for the last few months? Neoliberal realism. It's where we're stuck, and I think a lot of it is in the quote unquote political conversations. And I say quote unquote because I don't think a lot of these conversations are political. But again, this is why I put this movie on there, because I can have this conversation with you guys, and I couldn't have that with Hereditary. So again, I win.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
Dude, Hereditary goes, and it's honestly like it's one of the only movies that innovate in this genre from a storytelling perspective in recent years. But I would say Late Night with the Devil does as well. Now, does it stick the landing? Nah.
I do have to. I'm going to say this. I want to say this on the screen. I could have said this to you personally, but I want to say this to you on the stream. You asked me a year ago, at least a year ago. You said, "Have you seen Barbarian?" And I said, "No, I haven't."
I did. Yeah.
And you said, "It's real." That's all you said was, "It's really good. It's like 3 movies in one." The other night, Ben Burgess goes, "Hey, have you seen that movie Barbarian?" "No, I haven't seen it." He goes, "It's really good."
Oh, really?
And so, again, I kept hearing you in my head, Conan, for no reason whatsoever. I hadn't talked to you in forever, hadn't seen your fucking face in forever. But anyway, just in my head, and I turn on Amazon, and Barbarian shows up, and I'm like, this is weird. So I watch it. I don't know anything about the movie.
Yeah,
better to go in that way. The trailer I saw looked interesting. I never said you're full of shit, and I never was like, yeah, is it? I was always like, okay, right?
Yeah.
I watched it, blew me away.
Good,
blew
right?
Me the fuck away, and that actress is hot.
Oh yeah,
that's
not nut quick.
I mean,
but Justin Long made the film for me. I mean, I love
so
Justin
good.
Long and pretty much everything. But
playing
There's a
it.
premise that you have to accept that's a little unbelievable and barbarian, but I liked it.
Well,
Just to say.
that's a
Building a
suspension of
whole
disbelief.
home underneath your house and no one
Yeah.
would notice.
That and
I mean, the
giant
trailer-
mutated Superwoman.
Yeah, the trailer makes it look like it's going to be an Airbnb horror, and I guess to a certain degree it is, but it's a lot more than that. And again, does every aspect of it work perfectly? I don't know, but I tell you what, it was goddamn enjoyable, which is more than I can say about like most modern horror movies, like *Malignant*, aka Hot Girl Basket Case. No, thank you. No, thank you. I've seen that goddamn movie. I was not interested in it. Like every time, everyone's like, "Oh, the new." Do not get me started on Long Legs, by the way.
I haven't seen Long Legs, but
Overrated.
all I've seen is this.
Not
I'm the
skip.
one. When Nicolas Cage does that shit and starts singing the song, I was like, that's the scariest shit ever. So I don't know anything about the movie.
He's the only decent thing in the movie. It's overrated.
Awful. It's trash.
But it's kind of drawing from Hereditary and other films, just not successfully.
It is taking the trappings of quote unquote elevated horror and doing things like that were done way better in movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs. I mean, it is the fact that people are going for this is like, oh, you piggies just like slop, huh? Okay, great. Here's your slop, piggies. And people are like, oh, it's the best horror movie in years. It's only the best horror movie that came out that week. You kidding me? This is why I can't mess with the genre that much anymore, because it makes me so angry, because I actually do care. If I didn't care, it wouldn't make me angry, right?
Well,
there's a horror movie I want to see. Have you guys seen this movie? It's called Trick or Treats, and it came out around the same time as Trick or Treat. David Carradine's in it.
I'm not familiar.
Have you seen it? No, you guys haven't seen it? Okay, it's on YouTube. We have to watch. We don't have to do a show about it. I just need to watch it, because anything with Trick or Treat in it, I'm definitely watching it, because I love holiday themed horror. And Trick or Treat, which is a movie, is one of my favorite heavy metal movies that doesn't play any of my favorite.
I like Trick or Treat. I enjoyed it.
Trick or Treats is, here's the synopsis. A babysitter is stuck watching over a young brat on Halloween night who keeps playing vicious pranks on her. To add to her trouble, the boy's deranged father has escaped from an asylum and is planning on making a visit. All right.
It's I don't understand anything about the film, and David Carradine is in it. And I tried to watch it as I was falling asleep last night, and I would keep waking up in the middle of it going, man, that kid sucks. He's like a what's it, Home Alone? Macaulay Culkin's character. But imagine if Macaulay Culkin's character was someone that you would want to get beat to shit up by sticky bandits. You would want the sticky bandits to beat the fuck out of him.
So I can't ask you this, Jason, but I can ask Conan. When I saw Long Legs, Conan, I thought that I actually appreciated Jodie Foster's performance in Silence of the Lambs so much more, because I thought Micah Monroe, or whatever her name is, the woman who played Lee Harker, was trying to do Jodie Foster's character in Silence of the Lambs, but she couldn't do the subtlety of emotion that Jodie Foster's uptight character managed to convey, despite this facade, right? This cold facade.
You're dead on.
Very challenging role. So
people,
pull it off, but
exactly, and it's a god tier role for Jodie Foster. It's one of the reasons why it's such a memorable character as well. But I think that you're absolutely right. I like Micah Monroe. I think she's good. There was a great movie called Significant Other she was in, like nobody saw, and I like her in Watcher. I thought It Follows was good. She's good, but there's no meat on the bones there. Like it's kind of like, again, it's Seven. We have Seven and Zodiac at home, right? It's kind of what it is, and Silence of the Lambs too, and nothing makes me mad. And Hereditary too.
Hereditary.
I'm also a huge Alicia Witt fan. I think she's doing her best work and wasted in this movie completely. It's sub Tubi core BS that people are treating like it's Citizen Kane.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's a shining city of failure.
Well, I have two things to add. Can we not add core on anything that doesn't have a breakdown? We have one rule. If it doesn't have a breakdown, we can't have core.
All right. Fair
and
enough.
Instead of no meat on the bones, can we call it assless horror?
Ooh.
Look. Okay. Fair enough. All I'll say is Long Legs is a shamelessly derivative, pathetic Instagram filter of a movie.
Bam.
Wow. Damn. That's hard.
And Jason's trying to get me displaced.
That's what you said inside right there.
There it is. And you're trying to get me displaced from any DEI committee that So, I'm honestly conflicted about that, but
Oh snap!
Like that's what you were hoping for. He said his prayers at night. Like, and bless mama and daddy, and make sure I get on the DEI committee so I can get a bump in my pay raise and build a deck on this house. Amen.
Oh, I don't know how we can end the show any better than that.
there it is. There it is. Jason could do his racial slur negotiations bit. Seal the deal.
Was that with? No, that wasn't with Conan. Who were we on with?
Me, you, and Ben. I think it was after Get Out, maybe, or while we were.
Oh, the how many N words can you?
Yeah,
put
I
in
mentioned. What was it? Gone with the Wind. That there's a controversy about the use of the so-called N word, and NAACP managed to displace the N word, but what the agreed upon replacement was darkies. So every place where they say darkies, which is many times they say darkies in a film, had originally been the so-called N word. So Jason went into a Stephen Root-like impression. Stephen Root is Bill Dauterive, imagining the negotiations, what that would have been like.
Fantastic. Very good.
Spot on.
By the way,
I say, sir.
I'll say it. Yeah, big Foghorn Leghorn energy. A couple things. I didn't come up with the term "to be core." I just said it because I was like, "Wow, that represents a style of movie that we all know what that means." Secondly, yeah, the dolls do look cool in long legs. Shame about the rest of the movie and how they're deployed as a attempted storytelling device. Because I could shoot. If you want to talk about it, I could tell you why none of it works.
I just want to see. I just want to see Conan have someone say "core" around him, like "to be core." Around him. Hey, is it a breakdown? You go fuck yourself, and then just turn away.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Slow core. All right, low. Where's your breakdown?
Where's your breakdown? Go fuck yourself. I'm sitting here waiting. I'm like, this is slow core, and I was like this. I was like, oh no, this.
No, when's it happening?
This is what does someone call it? This is a norm core.
Norm core. Come on, all right. Yeah.
So
it's about Norman Lear movies. Yeah.
The Nicolas Cage makeup in Long Legs.
That I haven't seen the movie. I just saw a YouTube short out of context, and it's the mom walking up to the I didn't even know it was Nicolas Cage. And and who are you talking to my daughter? And I'm the one with the thing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, what is this? I'm locking my doors and shit. I'm like, this is the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. When you watch the movie, is it not as scary?
No. Like bad. Like Nicolas Cage goes hard. Don't get me wrong, but like it's deeply ineffectual.
You can't save that movie.
No. Wow. Yeah, I mean, Alicia Witt's she's doing her best work as well, and she can't.
And so good, she's almost unrecognizable.
Absolutely,
she's very good. But
no, if you want to see Nicolas Cage going hard as can be in an awesome horror movie, look at Mandy.
Oh, Mandy's great.
Yeah,
Mandy's great. Nicolas Cage is. I liked him in the Five Nights at Freddy's take, where he's just killing the shit out of possessed animatronic.
Oh yeah, you made me buy that.
Monsters. Yeah. But let's go to the last film that I'm sure Teray never watched.
So I'm out.
Look at him.
I got nothing.
The film is it Demonio or
El Demonio? Yeah, Demon.
The Demon. We'll just call it The Demon from 1963. Yeah. The film's depiction of possession intersects the themes of spousal abuse and societal control over women's bodies. How does The Demon critique patriarchal norms within the framework of possession? Quote, "She is not possessed by the devil, she is possessed by life." An assertion that challenges religious and societal assumptions about women's behavior. How does the Italian setting and cultural background affect the story's portrayal of religious authority and its role in perpetuating gender oppression?
Sure. So I
real quick.
I wanted to have this included because Rondi is not a go-to director for this era of film. Again, most people think of for good reason Mario Bava, Fulci, et cetera. Puri's she's the titular character. she's really into this dude. I don't know why. This dude sucks, and she's awesome and hot, and as tends to be the case for Italian horror movies around this time. Like it's like, okay, you get
The
this.
actress is very Teray. I have to say, you can find the film on Amazon.
It's like, it's Tubi, Shudder.
So Tubi, it
yeah.
might give you the year 2022.
Right, you got
that kind of throwback looking cover.
Yeah.
It is from 1963, and it's shot really well.
Yeah,
the story moves well. Of course, it's subtitled, and the actress in it is kind of ridiculous.
So I mentioned in context, I was talking about something earlier that like it's rough for her that these villagers, like she gets this physical and sexual violence constantly, including with like she's sent to this charlatan that's ostensibly like an exorcist, right? And actually there's no ambiguity whatsoever. He rapes her, and it's horrible because I mean, I've yet to see like why everyone treats her like Frankenstein's monster, and it's mostly because she doesn't conform to the religious norms and societal norms of this small Italian village. And if you juxtapose that and folk magic along with like Catholicism traditions in South Italy around this time, it absolutely makes sense. You just have this tormented woman who's like living a life in pain and is treated as if, again, it must be, she's just wrong. Oh, now she's possessed. Oh, she caused the death of this child. Let's go build like a basement apartment, people under the stairs style, where we can just hide her away. What? Like crazy, like it's insane how much she has to do. Like there's a lot of parallels with Fellini, Nights of Cabiria, which centers a sex worker that does no wrong of any kind, but is just treated like crap everywhere she goes, which arguably is probably being female in 1963. But it's in a lot of ways, and the reason why I wanted to include it is because in a lot of ways it's hugely influential on the genre. Yeah, because you just are, when you see her with the quote unquote like possession, I was reminded of Isabella Gianni in the movie Possession, where she's just going so hard with it that you're like, oh wow, this is, and you're left to think like, is this because she's like been driven insane from this horrific treatment from these this small-minded villager zealots, or is this actual possession? Well, they do an exorcism, like kind of a midday, like not even like bringing it up as it's anything special, but it's in the Italian neo realist style, so it has a really cool vibe. It's one of the movies I can think of that's like both sadistic and compassionate at the same time. And again, I wanted it included because before the Friedkin movie, this genre did exist, and it's really underrated. I think Criterion put it in a collection, like a Halloween-based collection, to kind of give it a little more juice recently. And Dalia Lava's amazing. She's really great. Everyone's just a piece of crap. Small-minded villager, and she just goes through all the worst stuff. And it's hard to see, but it's another example of like for me, it's like, what is it like to be the possessed and to be treated in such a way, that again, like that's the thing where she's like super into this dude. I don't know why he sucks, and he's like, no, I'm getting married. I can't be with you. I can't be with you. Oh, let me wrestle you to the ground, and I'll kind of grope you a little bit though.
Yeah, it was. It's insane. But this,
what are you
just
doing?
to give you an idea of what she looks like. There you go, Teray.
Dude, she goes hard.
She's very flexible. Here she is in the possession.
Still working on cutting down on that committee work for me,
Here's another one of the possession scenes, and then what a great shot.
Yeah, it's a beautiful looking movie, and
look at that with the
it looks cool as hell. And I'll freely admit that until I saw this, I wasn't even familiar with like the director's other work. It's just one of those things where I think if you live in America and you don't seek these kinds of things out, it's really easy just to like not pay attention. I mean, how many? I know people that are like, "Oh, I don't watch old movies," and they're talking about some from the 2000s. I'm like, get out of here.
But people say
We're
late
done. We're
20th
done
century
talking.
like it's another time. Yeah.
Yeah. So are people watching like obscurest Italian neo-realist horror possession movies from the 1960s? Probably not, but they should. It's good. It's a good movie.
I don't
And
want
$4 on Amazon Prime.
It's worth. You know what, dude? Seriously, it's worth the $4.
It's good,
Yeah.
right?
Also, if you show that movie instead of Orgasmo,
I had Lindsay walk in, and when she was like just going like super hard in the bed, and she was kind of like walked in the room as I was like, she's possessed, because it sounded like something else is going on. Is all I'm gonna say.
I'm not watching a stag film from '54 again. I promise. This is totally above board. It's homework. I'll be upstairs in a minute.
I was like, it's research. I'm watching it again for the show. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out. I do want to read some of these comments for you guys that people left.
Oh man.
I'll start with the top. There's a whole corpus of Jewish exorcism stories.
Yeah.
They aren't demons, more like ghosts, and we suck at exorcising them. Almost all the stories, the victim dies. So that was to Teray's earlier point. His anti-Semitic point of Jews.
I think it was the opposite of anti-Semitism, actually, because
No, it was like
they
aspirational.
discovered the monotheistic God, right? And they didn't believe in that hierarchy.
And golems and stuff. That's a whole other Dybbuk. That's a whole other.
The scene with the nurse in Exorcist 3 scared the heck out of me by Sune.
That was very well
Sune.
done.
Sune is our moderator. So shout out to Sune! Exorcist
again,
3 is
would be on a
scary
list.
as shit. There you go.
Yes.
Exorcist 3 is scary as shit, is fair and true.
Yeah.
This is also from Dead Whiskey. The Exorcist vibe is great. Early Friedkin is some of my favorite. Loses me at cruising, but Sorcerer is amazing.
Sorcerer is great. It's just he should have called it literally anything else. Just call it Wages of Fear, dude. Like, why didn't you just call it Wages of Fear?
Babadook.
I think someone should do a write-up comparing The Exorcist and the Babadook. I would, but I haven't seen the Babadook, and I'm very lazy.
Oh man.
Other than that, it's a layup. Yeah.
That's a great comment. Thank you, Jacob Burgess, for that one.
Excellent.
Here's a super chat from Dizzle McFizzle. Can Shaft be understood as an Exorcist movie, and can The Exorcist be understood as a Shaft movie? They both have a super sharp man beating a woman.
Ooh. So wait, Jason, what did you think of the Babadook? You've seen it, right?
I saw the Babadook. I saw it one time, and I thought it was a very adorable film.
Adorable.
Yeah.
Okay. I liked the fact that they used the metaphor for mental illness, or sorry, the demon metaphor is a window onto grief and mental illness. I thought that was very
I'd
well
have
done.
to watch it again, but I just remember it being adorable.
I just remember it was included on landmark films of queer culture by accident, like on like a list. Like somebody just like screwed up.
Wow.
So that became like a running joke for a long time. That was like, oh, it's representation. It's a Babadook.
I love the way that the TV show What We Do in the Shadows uses Babadooks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As an actual thing.
We just covered the movie, which a lot of people don't even realize it's based on a movie that's also very good. Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi. And then we did Red.
It's a movie first.
A lot of people in our Discord, at least, they were like, "What is a movie?" But it was like, "Come on, catch up." But it was great because we timed it just in time for the new season to premiere, which is great. And it's the last.
The new season is coming out. They're having a season 6, so I'm very excited to see how Guillermo.
Cool.
Well, he's no longer a vampire, right?
Yeah,
that's how season 5 ends, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Brutal corridor jump scene in Exorcist 3 always stood out for its shock value.
That's the one I was saying. That was like that would be in like a top 100 scenes of all time, horror or otherwise.
100%. Yeah.
Stigmata is the best exorcism related movie because Patricia Arquette. You know what? That's fair. It also because it mentions a lost gospel where it says the kingdom of God is within, which is interesting.
It's an anti-Catholic film.
I'm sure I didn't watch it, but
it's not good. It's not scary.
You're not selling me on
done
it.
for what it is, but it's not scary.
It's neither good nor scary.
Yeah. Sith Lord
Strike, Patricia Arquette. Well, no.
Hi, Jason. I just hopped on. What about Hereditary? I love that movie. We
Well,
talked about Hereditary. And why
canonically,
everybody
good.
loves it. I have to give Hereditary another chance.
You do.
I do. I've been really quick in life in general to tell things to fuck off.
It rewards multiple viewings, is what I'll say. There's
and
stuff I
that's-
picked on the second time that I was
does.
like, oh,
That's an internal
Ooh, yeah.
problem I'm having. So I will try to, exercise some of my own personal demons and give that movie another shot. But it was not going to make this list because it didn't cover what I wanted to talk about. I don't know much about making
There it
art,
is.
music, or film. I do, however, know a lot about drugs. Cocaine very rarely improves much of anything, especially if you're not also partaking. I think that was when I said something about Stephen King and the cocaine he took when he made
right. That didn't help the
Maximum
the-
Overdrive.
Yeah.
That didn't help the directorial prowess of Maximum Overdrive. Correct.
Sorry.
Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is a horror thriller in the vein of these 90s movies. Yeah, I'd buy that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Sorry,
those
I put
vibes.
the Do Not Disturb on, and that's a telemarketer call that have been really heating
Word.
up in this election season.
Mm.
Are you getting a lot of text messages from Kamala Harris?
My man, I get like 7 a day. Like
It's all right. Kamala's not texting you.
Oh,
My-
I get texts all the time. Yeah, but I already voted, so
Well, and I
done.
think part of it is that also being in a swing state too. But my favorite, it wasn't directly from the campaign. I actually I sent this out as like an Instagram story because I thought I was so ballsy. It was like one of these orgs. I don't know. I feel like there's like a million of these orgs that are, but it was trying to like shame me and was like, here it is. I'm gonna read it to you. Right. We asked 6 times if you support VP Harris, but you still didn't complete the poll? Question mark, exclamation mark, question mark. I'm sorry. Like, did I ghost you from a date? Like, what? Because I've been married over 10 years, and that would be weird. But, like,
donating to a campaign and Tinder now the same thing. Just remember that.
the fact that this person typed this out and it was like, no, we're gonna do a question mark and 2 exclamation points.
That's like a hay with 2 Y's.
Yeah. Hey, we asked you 6 times. What are you trying to collect a bill? Ask me if I like hit a poll if I support VP Harris. Man, come on.
Neo-traditionalism in 90s horror with Bram Stoker's Dracula, Interview with the Vampire, and Brannigan's Frankenstein. Let's see.
Oh, we talked about Brannigan's Frankenstein a little bit when we did Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I said Brannigan. Isn't that a singer?
Brannigan.
Is that the woman that sang Gloria?
I was thinking of Zach Brannigan, but
Isn't that her name?
Laura Brannigan.
Yeah, right.
That was her.
I think
That
they got
feels
your
right.
number.
And that was
real
a
quick,
Spanish group initially. The first version of that was
the first version of that, yeah.
Yeah.
This month we're doing all vampire movies. Last one of which is Tuesday. We're doing Abigail, but we did a great episode of Bram Stoker's Dracula earlier this month. That if you're interested in that movie, you should check out.
Who was on that episode? Like
that was just core. That was just Forrest, Christina, and me.
Or Mark Hamill. Like who the fuck was on that one? Movie night extravaganza be like having like 15 views, but it'll be like, yeah, we're sitting here with Marlon Brando. He exercised him through a Ouija board, and he's always down to come on and talk with us.
This man is not wrong. I don't understand it. It's like hiding in plain sight.
Like if you want to see some interesting conversation, they had the guy that wrote Rogue One on twice.
Yeah.
Damn.
The guy that did Heathers came on.
Yeah,
If you want to see some
he's saying about a couple times
conversations about movies. And
we had
people
Alex
talk about
Cox on. You did too, though. So
I
I
had
guess that's
Alex
not that
Cox on.
impressive.
I think I had Alex Cox on first.
Yeah, but our
Dude.
episode's better because he didn't get in the weeds about some nonsense about never mind. You know what?
Well, because you learned your lesson. You're like,
yeah,
third rails to avoid with Alex Cox.
yeah. I was like, oh, we ain't gonna do that.
So did Abigail feel to you like Ready or Not, just with vampires?
Yeah, I mean, Abigail. So I guess what I should say is tune in on Tuesday to find out, right? But I'm not going to.
There you go.
I think it should have been about 20 minutes shorter.
Okay.
But I wasn't mad at it, and like the
Oh.
pressurized blood bag thing works a lot for me. I think Dan Stevens ate it up, and like I think he's great. I've been a fan of his since Legion. You know, that's awesome. Not the movie Legion, the show. And I honestly was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this one. I just don't think I'm gonna like it. And then I watched it. I was like, oh, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant looks exactly like someone said Elon Musk who took the Venom serum.
That is a great description. Though I like Kevin Durant, so
I do too. I wouldn't
feel
wish that
uncomfortable
enemy.
with it, but it's accurate.
Yeah, someone lit him up though. And I was like, respect. That's a good one.
Guys who grew up with video shops, VHS will watch everything and find the silver lining in it all. That is me in a fucking nutshell. And that is why I don't get along with a lot of these movie critics that have their heads up their butts, because I do try to find the silver lining in most things, except Hereditary.
That's true. Yeah.
Except for Ari Aster.
You are consistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watching that movie, The Lost Empire, with the ninjas that have throwing stars that are yo-yos, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And they were like doing interpretive dance with the yo-yo throwing stars.
Hey, read this so we can get it off the screen.
Get Out is so trash. Midsommar was way better than Get Out, and I'm black, says Sith Lord Prince.
I mean, that's like comparing apples and cucumbers for first all. And like, I don't know, like opinions vary on Earth's shape. I thought Get Out was great.
Okay.
Did it solve all the problems of racism? No, neither did Crash. You know,
well,
but
Midsommar killed William Harper Jackson or whatever his name is, and that's unfortunate because I like him. He's a good actor.
I like Midsommar. I don't care if anyone doesn't like it. I like Get Out. I don't care if anyone doesn't like it.
They're both good.
Like what you like. Ultimately, it's the theme of the show.
Doesn't bother me at all.
And fuck what anyone has to say.
And fuck long legs too.
Well, the film, not in general.
Yeah, not in general.
Or unless.
Well,
right. I like my art slipped into my B horror, not horror slipped into my art shit also. That's an interesting way to put it. All cultural and political conditioning sort of acts like being possessed. Maybe that is part of the reasons we find it scary, says Common Goose.
I think we should have some exorcisms all across the board after this election, frankly. But yeah,
before could be nice too.
And in closing, Kushlook, a longtime listener, no time caller, says, if you're Hassan Piker, well, you have the looks, you know your way around the technology, you know you can get this success if you do what is needed. That is important. And that is what we see in a great film like Late Night with the Devil, where the person has all those things. He's got the charm, he's got the looks, he's got the personality. He just has to make that pact with Satan. So,
and one minor
performance as a host, his performance as a late night host was great. It was very believable.
I'm like, give that dude more roles, like that aren't just that guy character actor roles, which he's also great at.
He's a Marvel guy. Apparently, he's in one of the Marvel movies as like a villain.
Which one?
Magneto.
No, he's like a henchman 4. No, he's in, I think, Ant-Man and the Wasp, or one of those Ant-Man movies
as Kurt. Who the hell's Kurt?
Kurt.
Oh yeah.
The villainous Kurt.
It's Charlie over there. What? Charlie? What comic book is he from? I don't know. He's just around. He's just the guy. We like him around.
Oh shit, it's Kurt.
He breaks us up with the wisecracks. Okay, great.
That's what Kurt does. Oh shit! It's when
it's Kurt.
Magneto and the fellas, and Kurt comes around like, oh shit.
Well, he was a polka dot man in Suicide Squad, which he was great in. With the Suicide Squad, the good one, not the piece of crap one.
So, Ray, did you watch the Suicide Squad?
No. I'm not a comic book movie.
You don't have to be. The Suicide Squad is just a great movie.
Okay.
Suicide Squad, that first one, trash in the trash can. Avoid.
That's with Will Smith. Yeah. Who's the other black guy they replace him with?
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock. He says. Oh man, where's that movie?
That's what the slap was really for.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, didn't they replace this?
Idris Elba is Bloodsport, and he's really good. Joel Kinnaman's in it. I'm talking about the good one. And King Shark is voiced by Sylvester Stallone. Great.
This is the second time Damn Yankees has come up, which is a fine musical if you like musicals.
Oh, they weren't talking about the band?
No.
That's why I ignored the questions. Like, I'm not talking about that fucking fucked off super group of pop songs.
Yeah. Damn Yankees is, by musical standards, pretty good. And,
I'm the one who wants to
Ooh.
be with you.
Don't piss on Paul Gilbert, please.
Deep inside, I hope you feel it
That's
too.
Mr. Big, though. That's Mr. Big. It's not
Same shit to me, cause it's all trash.
But not Paul Gilbert.
Pop super
Billy
groups
Sheehan.
are always ass.
Yeah.
There you go.
I have
There
seen
you go,
Event
buddy.
Horizon. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. I
Damn
watched
Yankees with
Sunshine.
Can You Take Me High
recently.
Enough, right?
That's
Can
better.
you take me
Yeah.
high
Yeah,
enough?
We actually did that on the show, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually better than I remember it being." And I remember
Damn
it being pretty
Yankees?
cool.
Yeah.
No,
Event Horizon, though, is like Aliens meets Hellraiser.
Event Horizon is
Yeah.
fucking amazing.
Yeah,
I
Event
thought
Horizon
it was the
goes
most
pretty
boring
hard.
movie that I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
I saw it in
Yeah.
a movie theater in New York.
I didn't like it when I saw it.
And I went by
Really?
First
myself
time.
because no one would go with me. And so I was like, fine. I had a sci-fi horror craving. Bam, I go to Event Horizon. And I realized just how much I needed a sidekick to talk shit through this shitty ass movie. Lawrence Fishburne was terrible in it. He was boring as fuck.
What about Sam Neill?
He's Sam Neill. I like the black guy who wasn't Lawrence Fishburne.
Wow.
Who was doing his best Eddie Murphy. He was good in it. He was Murphonic 10 years after the fact, though. Which is the
Murphonic
sort of funny about it.
Talking about
He was good.
Richard T. Jones, right? Like that
Is
guy.
his name?
Yeah,
That's
he's-
the
he was in-
blackest name ever. If you're gonna be a black guy in a movie, you name Richard T. Jones.
Richard
What was
T.
the black guy's
Jones.
name from Magnum PI?
Oh,
He had a
TC.
TC, yeah, TC Johnson Carter.
Yeah, he was in one episode of Sesame Street. Him, I met TC at a UNCF function when I was about 16 or 17.
And
Nice
what did he
guy.
say to you?
Yeah, I wasn't a fine woman. He said nothing. So,
You're like, hey,
It was
great to
that
meet you.
simple.
Out of my way, yellow nigga.
that was pretty much it.
I'm looking for the
There was a
cows.
particular woman that he had an eye on. So as did the rest of us.
Well, hey, I mean,
And then he started playing
Respect.
damn Yankees, and then the rest was.
He flew a helicopter to her door.
But the damn Yankees had 2 songs. All I can remember was the High Enough song. What was the other song?
Okay, so that was Let Me Take You. Can I Take You Higher?
Yeah.
Or something like
actor Roger Earl Mosley, by the way, who played
Okay.
TC.
Yeah. And Jason would put that up there with I don't know, Nkrumah Lumumba Johnson as the black name ever. Who is essentially someone I grew up with, but
right. Yeah.
You know, with all this fucking like Negro pride, my son doesn't go to school with any Lumumbas.
Oh.
And he goes to school in Oakland. So Oakland is, you're letting everybody down. If you're not naming your
every
kid
game.
Lumumba Fanon, then you're doing it all wrong. Don't come to school with your vegan lunchbox and your hemp pants if your name isn't Lumumba Fanon.
well, those
By
names
that-
are,
By that Black Panther baby name book.
there it is.
There's a Black Panther baby name.
Oh, I'm just making it up. Maybe.
Oh God!
I don't know.
I thought it
Maybe
was
there
a
is.
real thing. I was about to
No.
get so excited. Like
But-
Christmas arrived early.
A lot of those names, and I have to fold myself into this, are great because you have these African first names like Touré,
Mhm.
and then these Anglo last names. And I'm not going to call out any of my friends who I grew up with, but they have crazy, interesting, strong, less ambiguous African names than Touré. I went to school with a couple of Lumumbas, let's say, and then these these super Anglo last names that are Dickensian, like Haversham. Right, Lumumba Haversham. No, it's my meth lab. It's not a
Yeah.
Horizon. It's a meth lab back there.
But yeah, that's what we need in this world is more strong names.
Yeah, more strong African names, like
More strong African names. I mean, they're out there.
I know.
I know. Mugabe. We don't have enough young Mugabes.
Mugabe.
Kalunda.
Mugabe Jones. Mugabe
Mugabe
Jones.
Douglas.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Just set your Wayback Machine, dial back to 1970s Southwest Atlanta, and you will find them all.
There's a Mugabe. If I can find a young
confident
Mugabe walking around,
there would be.
I'm gonna be like, word? Tell me more. About
We so I told you we just did From Dusk Till Dawn, right? Which I like that movie.
I enjoy that one. Yeah,
It's a great work of art. Nah, not really, but I dig it. I dig it a lot.
that's good.
And I remembered Tom Savini, because how can you forget Sex Machine, right?
Yep.
But I had totally and absolutely forgotten that I was like, oh, Fred Williamson's in this movie. That's awesome. And so I mentioned it, and I mentioned like how much I dig of it, and I was like, yeah, and also like that dude's still kicking around. He's 86 years old now, right? And then I made the point, and of course Forrest loved this. I was like, I'm not going to mention some of his more famous films on stream, because of course you're familiar with his work, right?
Fred Williams.
Blaxploitation, Fred Williamson. Yeah. So remember the Boss movie?
Jim Brown is the guy that was in the movie. I think it was called Nigger.
Oh
Yeah. Well, it's there's 1974. It's Boss.
Inward.
Boss. Now, see, if I could remember what you said they did from Gone with the Wind, I was going to say Boss Starkey. Boss Starkey. There we go. All right. Boss Starkey. Yeah. And like Forrest wasn't familiar, so he like looked that up on screen. And he was like, "Oh, I see why you didn't mention it." I was like, yep. This is Revolution.
Fred Williamson is known as Fred the Hammer Williamson. Do you know what that is? Because
I'm assuming it's his dick.
Whoa! Wow! No.
I don't know.
He's known as the Hammer because he was a very good professional football player for the Kansas City Chiefs, and there was a legal move that you could do at the time called the forearm shiver, where he would take his forearm and literally hit. He was a safety, I believe. And he would hit receivers in the head with his forearm, and that's why he was called the Hammer. Because if you came across the middle, you'd have to deal with the hammer. Fred the Hammer. So he didn't use his penis to tackle anybody.
I didn't think that's what
good
it was.
for us.
No Diddy parties for Fred Hammer.
Yeah.
Right.
A very wholesome man in that regard.
Right.
But
I believe they outlawed the move because of him, because it was so, I don't want to say deadly, but you can imagine what it's like to get hit with a forearm.
But I was talking about how in all these like, grindhouse 70s homaging or 70s films, there's always like black guys always got to talk about when we were in the Nom, blah blah blah, this and that. And I loved it. And From
that was
Dusk
a great
Till Dawn,
scene. Yeah,
he's like telling that story, and like camera kind of moves over, and like he's like acting it out and everything. And then you see Tom Savini like realizing he's transforming, and you get that kind of like he gets like the tooth comes out, and it's kind of like well, and it's so freaking funny that him telling that story is why he gets got, and it's like that.
Yeah.
Underrated. And then all people want to talk about is Selma Hayek's foot in Quentin Tarantino's mouth. That's all they want to talk about.
So did you feel a little uncomfortable though when he was talking about the little bits of yellow flesh on his knife?
I mean, look, man. What am I gonna say here? Are we just BSing now? What are we doing?
To raise a man of refinement. So someone says, thank you guys very much. We will be back Tuesday with a normal episode of This is Revolution. We'll be talking about a book, which I forget the title of the book right now because there's a few books we'll be talking about in the next few weeks. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please go back and check out some of the other shows that we did this week. We did a very great show on Thursday called Morningside, the 1979 Greensboro Massacre and the Struggle for the Soul of America. So definitely check that out. And then Tuesday we did a show that I'm super stoked about because I'm part of this compendium that'll be coming out called What's Left of Metal, where I had the man that's gonna be putting it together, David Burke, and we had a very, very enlightening conversation about metal and politics and the left, and we even take a fun little turn down why David felt that in a society where people were living at the highest standards of middle-class comfort, you have some of the most debaucherous behaviors of suburban young people in the Scandinavian black metal scene. So it's a really cool conversation. Check those shows out. They're all up right now. Definitely rewatch this. Send it to your friends. Comment in here about the Exorcism movies that you like. Also, make your pitch or argument of why I effed up by not having Hereditary on the show, not having Evil Dead on the show, why I should have talked about Exorcist 2 because that's the good one. Why
No
we
one's going to
didn't
say
talk
that.
No one's
about,
gonna say that. Yeah.
the
No
last
way.
Exorcism, which is the first
I
found
like that
footage
one.
exorcism movie. Tell me why I missed everything on that, and then defend Teray why he's right and defend Conan on why he's right as well.
There you go.
All right.
Get on it.
I guess that's it, right?
Thank you guys so much for hanging out.
Report on my desk Monday morning, please.
And we are out.
Back when Russia was the Union of Soviet Social Republics, and they'd say, "Oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America?" I said, "Well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers, and they have a lot more freedom than I have. All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government."